I'd like to call this committee of the whole meeting for Monday, April 9th to order. First item is the adoption of the agenda. Recommendations committee of the whole adopts the April 9th, 2018 agenda as presented. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Ross. Councillor Tripp. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Moving on to 3A, adoption of the minutes. Recommendation committee of the whole adopts the March 12th, 2018 committee of the whole meeting minutes as presented. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. All right, moving on to our registered petitions and delegations. First off, we have representatives from the RCMP presenting their annual report on the RCMP activities in Grand Forks. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. First off, before I get started, I would like to introduce the new officer in charge of Kootenay Boundary Regional Detachment. This is Inspector Tim Olmstead. He is the new OIC, and he is the person that I report to. So,
Welcome, Mr. Olmstead.
thank you.
Can we have some people on the mic, please?
Oh, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Sounds like a telephone commercial.
So before you, I believe you have a electronic version of this report. Pages, basically, section 1, the executive summary, is a kind of a brief overview of some of the situations and some of the things in 2017 that we kind of dealt with in terms of routine planning. Really isn't a lot of changes there other than the fact of our resourcing issue, which we've spoken to several occasions about some of the struggles we had over the year in 2017. In addition, it just explains the summer policing program in Christina Lake. I know not more of an area director presentation, but essentially explaining what we were able to do at Christina Lake and how we were able to kind of proactively prevent that from gaining more and more of an issue as it has been, in 5 years previous. At the end of page 3, there is a comment from 2016, which is kind of bears some weight to today's situation. Is that we went from a fairly senior detachment to a fairly junior detachment, essentially within a couple of months. And that had to do with the transfer of 2 fairly senior members, and that means they were replaced with new members, recruits, who are now up to almost 2 years service each. So it does, change the risk for managing a little bit, but overall, both those members are doing very well, and they're a great asset to the detachment. At the very bottom there, I will be departing soon once I have a house sale, and I was informed on Friday of last week that my replacement will have to go through a promotion process. There is no lateral interest, which means promotion processes normally take 6 to 9 months to come to fruition. So we're looking at probably close to winter time before my replacement is here. Section 2 is an overview of the area we police. Some of the incidents in terms of the regionalized detachment model, shifting of resources from place to place for high-profile events such as Bylaw and our very own Cannabis. It's just a reality in a regionalized detachment that resources are shared between detachments depending on who needs what. Here's our, basically on the bottom of the page is, ideally this is what Grand Forks Detachment has for resources. There is a total of 10 members at Grand Forks when we are operating at full capacity. Last census I read, we had a total estimated population service area was 8,462 in our detachment area. Moving on to page 5, for some of the other things at Christina Lake, everybody knows what happens in the summertime. In Christina Lake, it goes from about 1,200 people to 5,000 people on July 1st, basically, and it stays that way till September long weekend. Just for everybody's knowledge of the funding envelope, I'm sure you're very aware of the funding envelope for the Grand Forks RCMP works. It falls under the provincial funding contract, not a municipal. Again, we provide 24-hour emergency response, but not 24-hour policing. Response times vary throughout the year for non-emergency calls. All our vehicles and buildings are owned and operated by the RCMP. I don't know if it's necessary for me to get into the training and how that flows out through the RCMP. Basically, in our division, we have a centralized training unit in Chilliwack where we send members for continuous updates on use of force training and additional training courses. So moving on to Section 3, which is planning for 2018. There should be no surprise here that our biggest issue here is property crime. Our planning in 18 is going to be focusing on the people that are committing property crime. We do work on a multifaceted approach. I've said many times in presentations that addiction is a social issue. You cannot arrest your way through a social issue. People that are addicted to drugs require multi-agency response to make things better. Some of that falls on the police, some of that does not fall on the police. Again, I think the most crippling thing we have in our community is a lack of easily accessible addiction treatment services and mental health services. In many cases, we see people that we deal with the criminal justice system that could be more appropriately dealt with via health services of some type. That's not all the time, but sometimes. I have completed a detailed business case requiring an extra cost to be added to Grand Forks detachment. Roughly for everyone's interest and knowledge, the total cost to add a member is about $250,000. The annual cost of a member is $161,000. Now that business case was moved up through the chain of command, and as I understand it, it will not happen. There was a big ask at the executive level to the new BC provincial government from our management of about 130 provincial members. And last I heard, the answer was 0. So I don't know how this is going to shake out. It's really above my head as to who is going to add provincial positions because it's not a municipal funding envelope.
Your worship, could I just ask a clarification?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Oh, sorry, turn your mic off.
Did I hear correctly that there will be no new recruits added to the British Columbia Force, or there will not be one added in Grand Forks detachment?
I think the provincial ask, the RCMP asked the new provincial government for about 130 provincial members. Grand Forks, I was told, was on that list. We are getting 0 across the province, is what I heard. So that is not something that I can solve. I've done the business case that we asked as an organization. And you got to remember, these are provincially funded positions, which means that there is no municipal funding envelope for that. So if a municipality says, no, we would like an extra member, they basically pony up the dollars and they get it. We don't fall into that envelope. So, yes, because we're provincial. Okay, so the ask was that, the response was 0. I don't know why, but it's clearly a decision made way above my pay grade. But I asked, and we are on the radar should that situation change. The business case has already been completed, and it's sitting there to be sent off if things change.
Follow-up.
Would it be beneficial if rural municipalities banded together and met with whoever, is it the Attorney General or Solicitor General or whoever is responsible for those contracts and those additional members to start lobbying, perhaps as early as UBCM?
I think it certainly can't hurt. Maybe Inspector Olmsted has some insight on this, but like I say, these are decisions made at a provincial level above my pay grade for sure. I've also the opinion that the more lobbying you do and the more noise you make, chances are you may come to the front, right? We're not the only detachment in this position, and that's what everybody has to realize is similar sized detachments in this area are going through the same problems we are. And it's not a Grand Forks issue entirely. We have some unique twists to things here, but the crime and the calls for service in some areas is going up. Interestingly enough, it's a lot of it along the Highway 3 corridor. And anytime you have a major highway running right through Main Street, you're gonna have problems with traveling criminal element.
So if I understand this correctly, Jim, the numbers you had mentioned are in reference to those that are funded by the province, not the ones that are funding, the municipalities are funding. So having said that, what you're saying is because the province funds it, they control it. If they feel they're not going to give anyone any other constables or officers, so be it. Is that what I'm hearing?
In a roundabout way, yeah, that's a short condensed version of it, but the reality of it is that money comes out of the provincial budget, right? And they can choose to spend that money as they see fit. And you know, like I say, we have asked, if the money all of a sudden becomes available and things change, the work has already been done. We wouldn't be behind the 8 ball because the business case is sitting there. And it was a pretty hard, I wouldn't say hard, but it was pretty intensive document to write. It required a lot of research and a lot of number crunching, and really it took a week or two of steady just documenting on my part. The good part is like I say, if things change, it's there, ready to go.
Yeah, my question was just to assess it properly, that it's on the provincial level and not federal level. That's what I want to have clarity on.
Maybe we can finish the presentation.
Okay. Is it, please?
It'll be very, very short.
Thank you, and begging your favor, I'm sorry to be interrupting your presentation. I just wanted to mention that we did get an email from a member of parliament that is tabling a motion that is going to ask for crime in rural communities to be studied at the federal level. And I think that will give us maybe some leverage when we go to the UBCM, because if that's happening at that level, we can tag on to that and certainly promote that.
Go ahead, continue, please.
Just some of the stuff or equipment I've added to the detachment. We are going to receive our additional police vehicle here soon, which is, the business case was done when I started here, and it was basically to minimize some inefficiencies that we had at the detachment of 2 members being in a vehicle, because we were short vehicles, and therefore it was really inefficient practice. So we're going to be adding a 5th vehicle to our fleet. The 2 side-by-sides, we used them quite a bit last year in policing operations, particularly Cannabis and patrolling the areas where we couldn't get to with a police car. City Park, BMX track along the river, that kind of things. These vehicles are fully insured, fully plated vehicles, and we have permission to drive them essentially anywhere within the province. That being said, they do have some limitations, but it gives us an option to get where we can't get, sometimes even on foot or with vehicles. It really have been kind of a neat little access vehicle. We did access a vehicle to remove somebody in a medical emergency with paramedics in the back one time, where we couldn't get with a truck, which I think they really kind of, next year you'll see them being used a lot more. And accessing areas where we can't get to, which is kind of nice because it keeps some of our more transient people on their toes because they don't expect the police to show up there where they are. Due to new safety regulations in regards to handling fentanyl drug exhibits, the Grand Forks Detachment we have obtained an ion scanner and a few, but together though, that equipment is about $75,000. And thankfully, you guys do fall under the provincial funding envelope, because under municipal funding, that bill went right to the city in some places. And it was a, here you go, you have to pay this kind of thing. But the reality is handling fentanyl is dangerous. It's dangerous for the officers, and it's dangerous for the staff and the detachment. So these are necessary pieces of equipment just to process drugs. Not that it matters to anyone here, but in terms of Christine Lake, substantially upgraded the detachment boat. It's actually an effective patrol vehicle now. We can, multiple members can actually occupy that boat. And it's going to prove very successful in the upcoming years. Just to speak to our resource shortages, Actually, that number now is we're down 4 out of 8 constables and 1 corporal temporarily, so we're running at 50% currently. Those resource shortages are being offset by reserve constables. Anybody who doesn't know what the reserve constable program is, essentially it's retired RCMP members that we engage with the force in kind of a part-time capacity. They're fully operational police officers. They have the same training we do. They just choose to come back after they've been retired and re-engage. And without them, over the last year, we would be in real serious trouble in terms of resources. Luckily, in that number, within 2 weeks, we're supposed to be down only to 2 out of 8, which we have to take holidays and training out of that number too. So, positive, we're getting some of our members back. Long-term shortages are a very multifaceted issue. It requires a lot of engagement on the level of the commander and the OIC to try to come up with a plan to get us back to where we should be, which is 100%. We are both very engaged in that issue. This is just something that we're looking into, a cost recovery process for Cannabis. We've kind of initiated this. Since 2015, it's gone from 2,000 people and there's 12,000 planned for this year. Our operations plan right now is $11,000 in overtime. And right now we're managing that event locally with Grand Forks resources. However, we may not have the resources to manage that locally. That would incur overtime, hotel rooms, meals, travel, and right now we are hoping that while we're looking at this cost recovery process as an option, just so we can fund it from outside. So we have some major initiatives we've undertaken in the 2018-2019 performance plan year. Which is, of course, we still have our citizens on patrol for Grand Forks and Christina Lake, both active organizations. We have a restorative justice memo of understanding with Crown Council, which is the Boundary Restorative Justice Society. Thankfully, youth crime in this community is not a big deal. It's not a big concern generally. We don't have a lot of youth crime, and we are able to use the Restorative Justice Society to filter a lot of those minor offenses, even some adult offenders, through restorative justice. We do have school liaison officer, we have a DARE officer, and basically youth safety education consists of RCMP officers attending school, making safety presentations on various topics of the day, whether that's safe use of the internet, cell phones, domestic violence, that kind of presentation, or even driving presentations. Block watch is still, I believe, is almost to the stage now where we've designated block captains, and we're progressing with that. 529 Garage is an electronic app, basically. It's a bike theft program. I have a member assigned to look into what would be required to create that for Grand Forks. Pawnbroker Bylaw, which is going to make a significant impact, I believe, on how the property that's stolen gets fenced, for lack of a better term. We never had a pawnbroker bylaw in Grand Forks, and I think it is going to prove to be a very successful program. Prolific offender program, it's when you're dealing with a person who is a prolific or problematic offender, it's not only the RCMP that they drain the resources of. It's mental health, it's the hospital, it's social services, and any one of those agencies. So the best approach to deal with a problematic or prolific offender is to engage those agencies to come up with a plan for this offender. So when we are dealing with them, it's not just a police issue. We engage other services and agencies to assist us with whether that's arresting or creating a plan or some kind of wellness plan. If it's an addiction issue, we do a multifaceted response. The same as the case management teams with probation, mental health, and substance abuse workers, and domestic violence teams. We have an active ICAT, and what ICAT stands for is Integrated Case Assessment Team. That is a specialized team that engages when there is a very serious risk of bodily harm to a victim in a domestic violence situation. Essentially what an ICAT team does is it's a crucial stakeholders meet. We have a quick meeting, we figure out how to solve the problem and how to make everybody safe, and we share our information at a table, much like a roundtable meeting. And rather than everybody taking weeks with Privacy Act and all that stuff, there's a serious risk or threat of bodily harm to someone. We meet with these teams, we make a decision, we act on it, and we make sure everyone's safe. SKY is Safe Kids and Youth, another program that we deal with MCFD essentially. It involves a safe place for kids to report crime to the police and other agencies. We are Conservation Officer Service. We work very closely with them all year. And as I understand it, we're getting a second Conservation Officer in Grand Forks. Dave Webster's moving to a training position, and then we're getting 2 actual enforcement officers. Christine Lake Summer Policing, that agreement's been in place for many, many years. It's a really good program. We do training sessions with local search and rescue organizations, Grand Forks Search and Rescue. And the SAFE program is a new program that has just started about 2 months ago. And what that is it's a program which allows businesses to post a sticker in their window where is a safe place for people of lesbian, bisexual, transgender people to hang out and report crime, or to go if they need to feel safe. So we're initiating that process. Our major objectives for 2018 is fairly simple. Continue to target property crime related to drug abuse and use. Continue our efforts towards identifying and prosecuting methamphetamine and fentanyl dealers. Continue to target, that's probably a bad word, but that's what it is, known prolific problematic offenders. 10% of the people cause 90% of the crime. And you need to focus your energy as a police force on those 10%. You do that by monitoring and enforcing bail, probation, and conditional sentence orders. I'll speak to that more a little later. Of course, there's always a traffic enforcement component and traffic safety education component. Speed, distracted driving, impaired driving, both alcohol and drug. We're fortunate enough in Grand Forks to have a drug recognition expert trained locally, which means we can call that person out to do a impaired driving by drug charge. We are probably one of the only detachments in this neck of the woods that have that. We are very fortunate, and I believe that member did 9 or 10 of those last year. And of course, the violence in relationships, domestic violence, are treated with priority and fully investigated. Section 4. Basically speaks to the crime reduction strategies, focusing around property crime, and what we did last year is focus on the same offenders. Overall, calls for service were up 12%. Some of this can be attributed to that we were busier, and some of this can be attributed to the fact that we actually coded the offenses properly, in my opinion. Traditionally, we would have a disturbance at a business. It would be carded as a disturbance, and that doesn't affect the criminal stats. What the offense is mischief affecting the lawful use and enjoyment of property. And we carded them as such, so we could pursue charges as necessary. Now, that was in conjunction with business owners. We had a mentality switch of kind of putting a Band-Aid on the problem, and we'll call you again tomorrow when the same problem happens again. Why not lay a charge so we can get this person in the system in some shape or fashion to get them help? Or if they did commit a criminal offense, let's charge them with a criminal offense instead of temporarily solving the problem. And you can see overall criminal offenses were up 7%. Property crime offenses were up 16% from 2016. And overall calls for service were up 12% from 2016. The increases attributable to several factors. The predominant factors, as I see them, were our resourcing issue. Remember that the province of British Columbia was in a variety of different states of emergency from basically April till October. We lost, by my count, 370 hours of policing to the fire departments. Well, you think about that, it's just a number, but if you think about an hour of police work, And as a member, being able to be proactive, driving around, and times that by 370. It was a provincial state of emergency. We had no options. We had to deploy members. End of story, kind of when it came to the province. So it's a fairly large number when you think about it in a town such as ours. We did have an increased amount of traveling criminal element along Highway 3, and as I spoke before, these crime groups, they move from place to place, and they use corridors to travel. And this year we had a corridor basically from Bridesville to Creston, where the same group was stealing cars and committing thefts along the way, break and enters. Back and forth all summer. Thankfully, we caught most of them here in Grand Forks, and a lot of them are currently being accommodated by the Queen. We did have an increase in mental health related calls, and mental health related calls are intense for the officers, they're exhausting, and they take a lot of time. Long gone are the days of showing up to someone who is doing inappropriate things downtown, tackling that person, handcuffing them, and take them to the doctor. Crisis intervention, de-escalation sometimes takes an hour or two per call to essentially talk that person into a vehicle or an ambulance to get them to the doctor. That's what we're supposed to do. But they're exhausting, and sometimes the officers end up waiting hours at the hospital. And it's not the hospital's fault. Our hospital here is merely a holding facility. Trail is where the actual assessments take place. Sometimes there's no beds in Trail. And if the person is a danger to themselves or others, sometimes our members end up at the hospital for hours and hours and hours until the person either is sedated or calms down to the point where we can leave them safely with the hospital staff. There's no security at the hospital. It's us. So they are draining, and they take a toll on the members. It's just one of those things where when you have a higher than normal percentage of the population with mental health issues, it's just a factor that gets deployed into it. Sometimes members are there for 4 hours. Sometimes it's 2 members there for 4 hours. And some of the more minor calls get stacked. And what that means is they get left in the queue. Not of course, anything that's a priority, but that's just the reality of it. Like I spoke about the crime statistics, right there is, what used to be scored as a breach of peace or a disturbance was properly scored as a criminal offense. If you have somebody who is yelling and screaming and affecting your business, that's a criminal charge. You can't do that. Before it was, just kind of make them go away. We don't want to charge them. Whereas now we're getting more cooperation and engagement with the businesses where they're actually giving statements, and we're at least recommending charges. Whether it goes to charge or not, at least we've done our job in recommending the charge. Sometimes those people are put on conditions not to go back to that business, not to have any contact with the employee that they may have had an argument with. It does offer some type of protection for the business and the employee, but it does also affect crime statistics. Enforcement of bail, probation, and conditional sentence orders has led to apprehension of prolific problematic offenders. Quite often, as the system works, people are released on conditions, whether that be a curfew or not to attend residence or no alcohol or whatever, and we enforce those conditions, we arrest them. And what it does is it builds a kind of a history of that offender, and the next time they do that, they're not likely to get out. Maybe they'll be held before a judge. If they're only held for 2 days, at least we have a break for 2 days. But enforcement of those conditions is crucial, especially when you're managing problematic offenders, because the majority of them are on some type of court order condition. So I just broke down totals for everyone here. So from 3,000 files to 3,353 in 1 year. Of these calls for service, these are kind of the calls that that don't really require a whole lot of investigative time. You can see that that's not a very large portion. I'm just quick math here, I'm looking at probably what, 600, 700 files out of 3,353 that were not something that the police needed to attend. Criminal code offenses were up 7%. Violent crime was down 16%. Well, not interesting enough, but seriously enough, most of that violent crime out of those 31, not most, but a lot were assaults on police officers. I had one, just by quick math, 4 members injured last year. Luckily, most of them are back to work. But we had a big spike in assaults on police. And that had to do basically with a group of traveling criminal elements. Property crime is up 16%, 119 to 138. Some sad news, but it's worth mentioning. The very large increase in units that the RCMP responded to. Most is actually, I would probably strike that and say some. I actually recrunched the numbers over the weekend. It's actually some. It's not most, but on offhand, I think we had 7 deaths related to fentanyl overdoses here in Grand Forks. You can see the mental health fact. File count, we went up about 18 files over the year, but those are files where the mental health act is the primary reason for the police to attend. Whether that's someone who is acting inappropriately downtown or is whatever the situation may be. That was the primary reason for the police to attend the file. That doesn't include where there was a component to the investigation. I said approximately 20% of the files. It could be higher, it could be 30, but you got to realize that 20 to 30% of every single one of those 3,353 files had a mental health component. It's pretty high. You can see our prisoner count dropped 60 in 1 year. I think a lot of that had to do with that there wasn't we lost a lot of hours of proactive policing, and we were lodging prisoners that needed to be lodged, and oftentimes we couldn't lodge other people because we have a guard shortage as well, which we're working. Just in conclusion, because the opiate crisis is such a high-profile topic, I know that my members administered naloxone, or commonly known as Narcan, to 3 people in 2017 to prevent death by drug overdose. Because of that change in response to complaints where overdose is suspected, the ambulance could have much higher stats. Generally, because of that change, the police don't respond to a complaint of an overdose where the people don't want us to attend. That is an EHS or paramedic thing only. So in 2017, as I've often spoke to, about 90% or 10% committing 90% of the crime. Our 12 most prolific, and I also use the word problematic offenders in there, were directly linked to over 380 calls for service, which is 14%. You may say, well, that doesn't jive with your numbers. But this only does not include investigations which we suspect they are linked. That's just ones where we can prove they are linked. So you think about 14% of our total files which we know they are linked, and the other ones we can't prove. So it's a very high number. Of note, almost all of those offenders spent time in jail in 2017. All were arrested at least once, and most were arrested on multiple occasions. Out of those 12 offenders, it's actually 4 now are currently incarcerated. 1 is not allowed in Grand Forks for the next 2.5 years. 1 has unfortunately passed on, and all remaining offenders are on conditions and have pending charges. Essentially, that is a summary of 2017, a little bit of history of 2016 for the Grand Forks RC.
Councillor Ross and Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Fitzke. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of questions because it's such an incredibly comprehensive report. Thank you for that. I know it's a lot of work preparing that. So just to be clear, so you're not horizontally or vertically, however you want to say, filling your position. You are going to be, it's a promotion, which takes longer, and you're going to be leaving as soon as your house sells. So in the interim, we're going to be down a very significant staff member. In Grand Forks, will be even more shorthanded until you are replaced. Is that true?
Yes, the short-term plan is the corporal will be acting as the sergeant. Due to the regionalized model that we fall under, there will be direct supervision from Inspector Olmsted and the Ops NCO, Sergeant Mike Wasenowicz out of Trails. So if there's any issues, because we're not a standalone detachment, for lack of a better term, there is always senior management for that corporal to engage or question or ask for help. So that is one of the benefits of the regionalized model. The process is going promotionally, which what I meant by lateral interest is there isn't a sergeant anywhere that's interested in coming to Grand Forks.
Right.
We've had several kind of make nibbles, but no one's actually totally taken the bait.
Right.
So it could go faster, but worst case scenario, 9 months.
So we're going to, like the summer, which is quite a busy period here, especially with the Cannabis, we're going to be down, and regionally, we're shorthanded already, as you said. So it's just going to be putting more pressure on existing staff during one of the busiest months of the year, where our population spikes.
Yeah, and I gotta say that Southeast District, our bosses come out of Cole, and they're the ones in the end that Inspector Olmsted has a pot of money that he controls, and they've been really good at letting us find the resources and spending that pot of money with reserve constables and overtime members from other communities. So yes, my position will go, but they won't run it. They won't let it run that short where we are in a state of crisis. There are options available.
Thank you.
Councilor Butler.
Yeah, thank you very much for your report, and I really appreciate all the communication we've had over the last year and coming out to the town hall meeting that we had. I've got two questions. First of all, I've had inquiries from members of the public if hiring some type of private security firm for downtown or even for Canfest would be something that would be helpful to you, and how that might interface with your operations, if it would be useful. The other question I have is council has a bylaw being proposed for the upcoming legalization of cannabis in Canada, and we're looking at where to designate production and retail facilities within the town. I'm just wondering if you've been consulted on that, or if you've provided any feedback for our bylaw, or if you have any comments on that for us now.
In terms of the private security issue for downtown, I mean, that would be something the city would have to do a risk analysis on and find out, the pros and cons of that. Would we work with any agency that you guys, decided to hire? Absolutely we would. The reality is any help is good help, essentially. There is certain limitations on what private organizations could do, like an observing report capacity, but if you're looking at contracting private security to go downtown and check doors and make sure things are secure and well lit and checking businesses, that's a great idea, I think. In terms of Cannabis, that's part of their plan. They have to hire security to run Cannabis. They have about 50 or 60. I'm meeting with the organizer of that event the next couple weeks. He has to provide us with a very detailed plan because there is a liquor license involved and there is 12,000 people at times. So we go over that with a fairly critical eye along with the liquor inspector to see what they have to do to control the beer gardens. And last year we saw a bit of a spike in public drinking, and we laid about 50 violation tickets for drinking in public, which I think was a good thing because it let them know that we weren't messing around with it. You're going to get a ticket. Traditionally, Cannabis does not create a lot of criminal investigations, but as the event grows, you're going to attract different element of the population. I've said many times before, the one good thing about Cannabis is it's the exact same weekend as Shambhala. Good thing for it attracting a certain element of people, bad thing for resourcing for Grand Forks. Because Shambhala is a huge event, it's on private property, and the boss, has to manage that event, you can well imagine 15 to 20,000 people. Last year a fire came through and they had to evacuate that and they didn't have a plan. So we make our Cannabis organizers provide a very detailed plan. We meet with them on multiple occasions and then we approve that liquor license if we think that it's a secure plan. In terms of the cannabis legalization, right now, because the plan is to legalize marijuana, I've also read that it may be delayed now. So, the planning stages for the RCMP is we're really waiting to see how this legislation is going to roll out at a national and a provincial level. Things could change in any given moment as to how that's going to roll out. And I think that it's a lot more intensive or extensive than was originally thought. And when you think about different provinces setting different ages for consumption, and we're back to, so you can drink beer at 18 when you're in Alberta, but you can't in BC. And I think that the RCMP as a whole and as a bigger organization will have to come up with some plans when we know what we're planning for. And the reality is right now, marijuana shops are trafficking marijuana. As it stands now, that's a legal activity. We've been down this road before, and we took action on the ones because they were actively trafficking cannabis and everything. Brazenly, in lack of a better word. So, in terms of us planning for it, right now I think that those wheels are in motion, but until the actual legalization and how that rolls out is actually public knowledge, I think that we are basically, as an organization, in a wait plan, but wait and see.
Thanks. I guess what I was getting at with our bylaw coming in is your thoughts on the number of stores downtown, if that will increase problematic offenders that you're already seeing, if it will increase crime rates in the downtown core, and as far as large grow-ops being in the city, how you'll see that increase or be an issue for RCMP having grow-ops within industrial areas or airport industrial, or where you would recommend seeing them if you prefer them in the regional district, or any thoughts you have on that?
In terms of downtown pot shops, for lack of a better term, attracting a certain element of people, I don't know. I suspect it would be like nightclubs and stuff, to a lesser extent, because those are operating during the day. But really, like I say, when the legalization rolls out, and depending on what each powers each municipality or province is given, they'll have the ability to maneuver that legislation within the confines of the law. In terms of large industrial grow operations, I know that Health Canada has certain conditions on grow-ops, where you can actually put your grow-ops. They can't be adjacent to a school, they can't be within a certain proximity of certain kind of businesses. Other than that, I suspect that legislation will change as well. So I can't answer your question because I don't know what the rules are.
Councilor Tripp.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Fensky. There's just been a real lot of helpful information in this report. And too, I'm concerned about the policing efforts that will need to increase when the cannabis legislation comes through. The provinces, the municipalities have actually put together a letter to go to the provinces to ask them for a 50% share funding of what they get from the federal government, because they're using this as one of their reasons that policing costs for communities are going to go up. So I think it's a given. Everybody knows that, and it's certainly an issue that the RCMP should be very actively involved with in terms of collaborating with communities over this issue. The two questions, I just have two questions quickly for you from your report, which was excellent. You'd mentioned that the RCMP are running at around 50%, and that seems to have been an ongoing figure for the last while. I don't know if you're at liberty to say why that may be, why you're down on those resources. And then the other question, or the other comment that you made was about the mental health, that we have a higher than average mental health component here. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, and if you had any possible suggestions for what could be done to address that in this community.
In terms of the resourcing issue, I don't want to get into specifics to discuss the reasons. There have been a number of injuries, and injuries happen, and it takes a long time sometimes for members to recover. Luckily, within 2 weeks, we should be up to 8 out of 10, if all goes well. In terms of the other ones, this is a unique job. You could have one bad day, and it may take you a year and a half to get back to work. As an employer, we're obligated to help and assist those people. Is it ideal? No. It's a process that has to go through, and employees have rights, employers have obligations. Ideally, I'd like to be 100%, but once again, I would say that we are not the only detachment. As a matter of fact, I know we're not the only detachment facing this same issue. It's at an executive level of managing those vacancies. And how do we better manage those vacancies? And things have changed internally within the RCMP in terms of managing those vacancies. The process seems to have streamlined substantially over the last year. And all I can tell you is that we're, speaking on behalf of the boss here, we're very engaged in that issue and managing that and eventually getting those employees back to work. In terms of, yes, that resourcing has been an issue for a long time. Your second issue, I apologize, I kind of wrote down a note and I can't remember what.
No, that's okay, because you were thinking about answering the first one.
Yeah.
It was just about the mental health component.
Oh,
We
yes.
have an increased number here, and do you have any ideas how to tackle that?
You know, mental health, in my experience as being a police officer for 16 and a half years, a lot of it's geography based. And the better the weather, generally the more mental health people you have in the community. Up north, this really wasn't a significant issue at all. But down south and my tenure on the island, it was a significant issue. Why? I mean, you can speculate many different reasons, but the reality is that there has to, in my opinion, there has to be a lot more money thrown into mental health. The girls that work over in that office are angels. You can only imagine how frustrating it is for them to work with the same people over and over and over again. It's the same people we work with. As I understand it, there's 2 or 3 of them, and they work 8 to 4. Well, things happen outside 8 to 4, and the services that we can call on are limited, right? And our obligations under the Mental Health Act are limited as well. Essentially, anybody who's a danger to themselves or others is a person we take for treatment. Once we get to the hospital and everyone's safe, our obligations are over. But that's where the gap is, in my opinion. It's from there to the hospital, and when they get out of the hospital, how do we manage them? What can we offer them to get better? And it's not slight or criticism against anyone, but I can only imagine how many case files they carry and how many people they have to manage. And in my opinion, the money needs to be directed towards mental health and addictions counseling.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I have to say that was the most excellent report, and I've been around for almost 40 years in the local government of the RCMP activities that I've heard, and I thank you very much for that. One of the things that, and I was discussing this earlier, is the fact that a request for 130 more officers to the province of British Columbia has been denied. This is a real concern to me, particularly as a rural community councillor. So I'm going to give this undertaking to you, is that the AKBLG is happening in this month, and I am going to communicate with other rural communities about their issues and try and get numbers so that when we go to the UBC in September, we will have something and numbers to lobby the appropriate department, and in that respect, perhaps I can get contact with you later as to who we should be talking to. And hopefully, if we get enough concern expressed, both to our MPs and to the powers that be that make those decisions, we can give some assistance to you. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Hearing none, I'd like to thank you, Inspector Olmsted and Sergeant Densky. Excellent report.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Item 4D, it's come to my attention very late this morning that neither the President nor the ED will be present to be able to give their report. So we will bypass that and move on to 4C. Also, before I go any further, my apologies. Councillor Crog will not be present, as you can see, and he had notified us that he wasn't going to be present. My apologies, I didn't tell you that at the beginning. On to 4C, Grand Forks Wildlife Association. Subject is the request to grant a license to occupy for a portion of the city property located just west of City Hall landfill. So we have presenters. Good morning.
Good morning. I have paper copies if anybody needs one, or if you just want. I have paper copies available for anybody who wants one, or.
I'll pass it down. One, because I
Yeah, just pass
read
it
one
on.
on them.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you. Please do me a favor and just identify yourself, please. Thank you.
My name is Frank Usselman. I'm the director.
Sorry, point of clarification, is this the same report that we received in our package already? Or?
It is,
Okay,
should be
I don't-
basically the
Okay,
same.
we'll just the electronic.
Frank Usselman, I'm the director with the Grand Forks Wildlife Association. Your worship, Mayor Conrad, and the members of council, I'm here on behalf of the Grand Forks Wildlife Association. Again, my name is Frank Usselman, I'm the director of the Grand Forks Wildlife Association. I'm here to request that you consider granting the Grand Forks Wildlife Association a license to occupy for a portion of city property located just to the west of the city landfill. The reasons that I'm requesting this action are to obtain an official license to occupy on a section of city property that has historically been used and is currently being used as a portion of the Grand Forks Wildlife Association's RCMP approved firing range. I believe that in approving our request, the community will benefit by A, having a certified, secure, maintained, year-round facility where members and guests can safely discharge their firearms. B, provide a structured, safe environment for new and young target shooters to learn and enhance their skills. C, provide a facility that is relatively close and easily accessible to our members and guests. And D, continue to provide a facility where law enforcement can practice their yearly qualifications. I believe that by not approving our request, the results will be that A, non-certified shooting range will pop up on the outskirts of city limits that may not be properly monitored and or maintained. B, it will cause a great inconvenience and possible legal ramifications for a number of our members. In conclusion, I request that the council adopts the following resolution. Issue a license to occupy for the portion of city property currently in use by and attached to the Grand Forks Wildlife Association's clearing range, located just west of the city landfill. And I have provided documentation after.
Thank you, Councilor Hunt.
You have to turn yourself off. Thank you. So only a portion of the rifle range is within the city limits and the balance is within the regional district?
Yes, the balance is on Crown land. We already have a lease to occupy that until approximately 2045.
Any other questions? Councilor Hammond?
Yeah, I was basically the same thing, because I see that it says that your current lease on the property is valid until 2045. But that only applies to the Crown land, not the city land.
Correct.
And how long is the city land lease?
We do not, to the best of my knowledge, have a lease at this time.
And so, is there an event happening that's making you believe that you're not going to be able to use this?
Right, so every, I believe it's 5 years, the RCMP, the Chief Firearms Officer for the province of British Columbia, goes around and inspects every rifle range in British Columbia or the province they're in. So part of the rules change on a regular basis. So one of the new ones now is that the section or all of or part of your rifle range or firing range is on someone else's property. We need to have a license to occupy, permission to be on their property.
And have you had permission in the past?
I haven't been able to find any legal documentation to it, but we've had word of mouth, I call it a gentleman's agreement, since probably 1972, at least, with the city.
I'm just confused as a follow-up as to why now you would need to, if you've had an agreement with the city since 1972.
Not fully.
A verbal agreement.
Just,
with the city.
okay.
So now I'm required by the Chief Firearms Officer, because the inspections, to have an actual license to occupy for that portion of land, city land that we are on.
Councilor Butler? Thank you, Councilor Tripp.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just through you to staff, I'm just wondering if they had any comment on this, or if there's any issues that they'd be dealing with on issuing those.
Yeah, that was going to be my recommendation.
Yes, Your Worship, I'm sure that the Development Planning Department has some information in that aspect that they can provide.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we've had a chance to review the materials and get a bit of history on the site. There's a couple of issues around zoning that would need to be resolved, whether there was something that was assigned to that parcel, or quite possibly this area was in use before that part of the city was under a zoning bylaw. So we've got to clarify that piece and perhaps bring some options forward for the next steps. I think a license to occupy would need to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw, or would need to be existing non-compliant, but over the long run, it might make sense to address the zoning issue as well.
Is this in reference due to the fact of the new OCP?
Your Worship, the zoning bylaw includes the land use designation for the area, which is heavy industrial,
Right.
which doesn't include the rifle range as a use. But if that has been a continuous use since the time that zoning bylaw applied, then it's existing non-compliant, and it can be a straightforward change.
Thank you. Councilor Tripp?
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I'm just wondering how much of the rifle range is on city property, and what area of that?
I don't know the exact number. I believe total with road and everything works out to approximately 0.8 of an acre. So the part that's on city property right now is the access road coming from Granby. And then there are buildings at, like the shooting building and the trap hut that are on city land. So as you can see on there, I actually have, if you go to the very last page, I believe, of the handouts I gave you, there's a map. And it shows, I don't know if it's on the computer or not. So it shows the property boundaries, and it shows the the buildings and stuff. Yeah, sorry, it's not on there, right?
It's not on.
It's not on there. So that's the old original, right there.
This one there.
Yeah, so that shows the map from, I believe it was 1982 that was sent to the city. That was asking, showing where we were gonna put, so all this stuff here is on city property. That was from 1981. So I'd like to also point out, for those who haven't read through the whole thing, that the rifle range has been in or on that area since at least 1902, that there's paper documentation showing it being there. And it has been there since that time, to the best of my knowledge.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going through the documentation. I mean, this has been, I see you had building permits issued in
There have been building permits
79,
issued, correct, yeah.
and it's been in use. I know that the RCMP use it for their own purposes, and I think it's really commendable on the part of the Law Association to want to formalize this so that they can continue, and I would certainly be prepared to put forward the motion that you have requested that the city enter into a license of occupation with the Grand Forks Wildlife Association for that portion of their shooting range that lies within the boundaries of the city or the city of Grand Forks.
Councillor Thompson, it would have to be a notice of motion to committee of the whole.
Yeah, but they've asked for a motion.
Yeah, well, we're going to give it
Okay, well then I
planning.
will.
Yeah.
Recommend it to planning until we get the information.
So your worship, because of course you're in the committee of the whole, we can't make a decision, it can be forwarded to a regular meeting. And possible recommendation to council is that it's going to be directing staff to do a little bit more research on that in order to make sure that we can follow the compliances, and then they can bring it back and report to council. That will advise as to the next steps we need to take in order to formalize it the correct way.
Exactly, as Mr. Watt had stated from the planning department, once they get us the information, it might be a straightforward case or it might not, but then council can bring it to a regular meeting and make that
I will
resolution.
make that my motion.
Yeah, and your worship, council can just ask staff to just start the research, and then we can just bring the report back. And so if that's fine, we can do that, and then that takes away a little bit of red tape.
Perfect. Councillor Hammond?
Yeah, I don't have a problem where the location of the rifle range is. And I know it's been there for eons and eons. And historically, it's been there forever. But there's been recent development along Riverside Drive where you have residential homes coming closer to the firing range and being impacted by the noise. I have heard this from people that are living there and have purchased new homes or had new homes built. So they asked me, this is probably a conversation that took place a year ago or a year and a half ago. But now that it's on the radar, I just want to know, is there a way to possibly soundproof that and put up barriers to restrict some of the noise coming back towards the river to eliminate that? Because we are going to see more residential growth expanding out further north. And it would be nice to be able to, rather than wait for confrontation to happen with residents that are concerned, have something in place ahead of time.
Well, I'm not an engineer, so I can't say for sure, but I'm not sure what would be able to be put there because basically the backstop of our range is the mountain range that is there, the hills. So I would suspect that most of the sound is actually bouncing backwards, and in order, again, I'm only speculating that for that sound to be mitigated, the wall would have to be as big as that mountain, I guess.
Perhaps a buffer of trees
Well,
coming along.
Yeah,
you're dealing with a residence factor, right? Yeah,
like residents, yeah.
residents. Resounding. Okay, do we have any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
Well, we have, Rick, We have a motion to present it to staff.
Yeah.
Recommendation.
Yeah.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to item 5, we do not have our director present this morning, so we will move on to presentations from staff. 6A. Subject matter, temporary use permit for tourism, commercial, special event, camping, development, and for engineering, development, and engineering services. Recommendations, committee of the whole recommends the council at the April 9, 2018 regular meeting authorize staff to proceed with statutory requirements for public notice of the decision at April 23rd, 2018 regular meeting regarding the temporary use permit for tourist, commercial, special event, camping purposes on the land zone, small lot residential R2, legally described as Lot 1, District Lots 380 and 520, SDYD Plan KAB 64274. Captain Thompson, all those, discussion. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I see that part of the plan here for the temporary use permit is to send out notices to residents, which I think is a great idea. I like the idea of having the camping here. I just want to make sure that residents in the surrounding area don't have a huge issue with it before we go ahead and issue that permit. I'm just wondering, you know, it is zoned small lot residential, why he's not asking for rezoning on the property, and if rezoning would downgrade the value of the property, or just the different options there, because it seems like it's going to be an ongoing facility that he's setting up here, and why we would be rezoning it rather than just doing a temporary use permit.
Okay, I'm going to direct this to our planning department. Mr. Watt. Ed.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on reviewing the initial application inquiry from Mr. Verdier from Cannabis, we recognize that the land is zoned small lot residential and it's a potential to be a significant featured housing location. So rather than removing that land base from potential for development to housing, should that become economically viable in the future, a temporary use permit was recommended as a way of meeting the current need and not requiring a lengthy rezoning process again when we get to the need to move it into residential if that should come.
Councilor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, I am of the mind that, as Councillor Butler was saying, that definitely the people in the neighboring subdivisions need to know and be very comfortable with this. And I'm just wondering, it sounds like you're planning on putting up some fairly substantial buildings there and doing some work with lighting and such, so that you definitely are going to be there for a duration, whether that be 3 or possibly 6 years. Otherwise, why would you be putting in that kind of infrastructure? And my concern is that we have here camping for special events such as Cannabis, which to me might suggest that you are planning to open up that camping for any other event that may come here that may desire to use your facility there to host campers. So I just would like your comments on that, and also to, as I say, I think that really is contingent upon the neighbors being comfortable with that and knowing exactly what they're getting in for.
Okay, how do we use this thing?
Just push the button.
It's a little game, as long as nobody else's is on, you get to
Okay.
go.
Yeah, the only thing we're putting out,
Yeah.
I'm out on lunch.
Yeah, so I'm speaking for my brother. The only thing we're putting up is a pavilion. So it's going to be an open air pavilion. There's going to be no buildings per se. There's going to be an 8-foot fence to keep people in and out, and they'll around the whole thing. And then there'll also be just landscape lighting. And then as far as the year-round use of, for other opportunities for camping and stuff, one of the things, we were approached last night by some of the Slow Pitch League, and right now they have 11 teams that have now come on board, and they said that they would love to have another facility where they'd be able to actually add some more teams. And the way they do it is they don't put in a pitcher's mound. All they do is they put in the bases, and it's a temporary type thing. And we haven't talked about it yet, but we're for sure really looking to how we can facilitate and power and, have them be able to use the park as well for that. So, yeah, it's gonna be more than just the one-time thing. We want it to be a community-type park where, the community gets to use it and in a safe way.
Councilor
Follow-up?
Trimmer?
Yeah. So maybe this would be directed to staff. Would staff make all of that information available to the neighbors so that they knew exactly what they were going to be having next to them?
Yeah, that's part of our legislative process, is notification of the surrounding properties.
And also, this property is bounding on Silver Kettle, I believe, if I'm not incorrect. So, and also the Dubur Village.
So, Portland. Another question to staff would be, so what would constitute neighbors? Do they have to actually be touching, or are you talking within like 100 meters, or what would constitute neighbors for this?
Good Mayor, thank you. So our legislative minimum is actually 30 meters, which touches on Mountain Place and touches on each of these properties. But in addition to the minimum, we're going to be posting the notice on site. So people driving by and in adjacent areas that are, further than that's required is there. And I believe we might be doing some hand delivery to the notice or the bulletin boards that are up in the facilities to the north. So it's not just a strict kind of 30-meter notification.
Right.
In addition to that, it's going into issues of the Gazette. So this Wednesday and the following Wednesday, we've scheduled the ad and have it in should council decide tonight to post this notification for the 23rd. It's ready to go. So it'll be in the Gazette, it'll be on our website, and it will be available for the neighbors to view.
Okay, and would it extend as far east as Bryson Place and those cul-de-sacs? There's about 3 or 4 cul-de-sacs along their road there. Would they all be getting that notification as well?
Thank you. I think if we were to go above and beyond the 30 meters, we probably could, but I think the sign notifications would probably suffice to address combined with the Gazette notifications.
Councilor Hammond, Councilor Butler.
So yeah, I similar to Councilor Tripp's question, I just see though that you're planning on only using the western portion of the property and not the east portion that backs onto Bryson Place, because you do.
This is the property.
That is the entire property?
Yeah.
You don't own that other piece on the right-hand side? To the east?
Right.
Oh, okay.
The,
I thought the whole path was
the owner of
back.
Bryson Place owns that other property there.
Okay, I thought it all went with one.
No.
It was one parcel, okay. Okay,
So
got
there's
it.
a field in between.
Yeah.
This is
Got it. Okay.
Councilor Butler, then Councilor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying the owner of that other property. I always thought that was city property, but that property's always been a concern for me because of the tall standing dry grass on it, and I'd love to see it cut down. So I'm just wondering, I know I've asked the city in the past, and since it's not our property, if there's any way of communicating with those owners of Bryson Place. Like right now, we don't have a bylaw requiring people owning property to maintain it for fire hazards, but with the amount of people going through that area with that field there, I would imagine Bryson Place would want to protect their houses and not have that field go up in flames. If there's any chance of collaborating with those owners to mitigate that fire hazard.
Yeah.
Councilor Thompson.
You're not asking for that particular property to be rezoned,
No.
so that, is it just a temporary
Yeah.
use? You own the land, right?
Yep, we own it outright. So eventually, in maybe 4 or 5 years, we might think about developing it into lots, residential lots, but we're undecided what we're gonna do with it. If Cannabis is long-term for the next 10 years, hopefully we'll reapply for a temporary use permit again in 3 or 4 years when we need to.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. I call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Okay,
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
appreciate you.
See you in a couple months.
Yeah. Depends. Yeah, no, you can. Do you have my number?
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a call anytime. Okay, thanks.
Okay, moving on to 6B, which is the tree policy for outside works. The recommendation of the committee of the whole recommends the council to adopt the urban forest policy number 1105 at the April 23rd regular meeting. Mover, please. Councillor Ross. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried.
I'm sorry, I did have something that I'd like to discuss on that. Are we okay to?
Call the question, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. That just kind of went by real fast. We're all just kind of decompressing off that one. In reading this through, I saw in the backgrounder there that it said that you could replace every removed tree. We could suggest that this bylaw put in there to replace every removed tree with 2 new trees where possible. And although I didn't see that actually within this, with this policy, not bylaw, I really think that would be a terrific thing to put in there. So I would be in favor of approving the policy with that change.
Okay, well, that discussion can be had at the April 23rd when the policy comes before council.
Okay.
Councillor Butler?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Would I be able to just get staff to comment on that question? I think it's an excellent question.
Well, we're having discussion on a subject matter that's not really appropriate at this point in time. It's going to be discussed at that 23rd meeting, but we can discuss it. Go
We
ahead.
like the 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah.
I think your worship is that, the more information that council has to ask staff in order for us to come back with,
Yeah.
if there's something that needs to be included, this is likely a really good time to have that discussion. So,
Well, basically, we're endorsing the 2-for-1.
Right.
The 2 for.
Yeah. So,
Double.
okay, to staff.
Just from a corporate point, there's still some internal reviews going on with the policy, so we're not 100% sure if we'll make it for the 23rd. But for the May meeting, we should have it done. Like, we try to have all staff managers look at every policy before it goes out. Kevin's not here this week, so we got this in at least so council could see it and bring back any feedback that we may implement.
Yeah.
So, but it's definitely more Kevin's and David's policy, but just.
Go ahead if you have any comments.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. We had kind of procedures and bylaw also to support this, so this was kind of a guiding principles for us, but that was to be included, I believe, in the bylaw to follow.
Okay. Everyone good? We've already called the questions, so we're going to move on to 6C. Our monthly highlight reports from our department managers. Recommendation is the committee will receive the monthly highlight reports from department managers. Mover, please. Councillor Hammond. Discussion. Councillor Butler.
Yeah, I just have one question for the reservoir cleaning. The contract was awarded, just wondering who it was awarded to.
Our manager. Agreed.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe it was awarded to MTS.
Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, good reports, and I just wanted to comment that I've been seeing the workers out doing the cleaning and sweeping of all the sand and debris off the grass in the streets, and they're doing a great job. It was an extra amount of debris, I think, this year from all the snow we had, so it's a big job, and they're doing really well. I just had one question, and that was on under the general heading there, received the gas tax strategic priorities fund grant, and it says and initiated a project. I just wondered what project or projects have been initiated with that grant money. I know on the budget there were quite a few listed, the Fifth Street water main, the LED lighting, the crosswalks, and different crosswalk replacements and different things. So I just was wondering which project or projects had been started with that money.
Correct. Thank you. Yours. Go ahead, Mr. Watt.
Thank you. So last year, council directed us to apply for 2 different grants related to the development of updated floodplain mapping and hazard assessment for floodplain areas, looking in particular at our infrastructure after last year's damages and what was vulnerable in the floodplain. So part of the capital budget that was allocated to it was looking at flood protection measures that might be required, both upgrades to existing or new ones. So the city contributed $50,000, and in 2 different grants received $225,000 to undertake this study. So we had an initial scoping meeting, so because we're combining 2 different grants into one project, we had our initial scoping meeting last week with Urban Systems, and they're going to be preparing a report on the scope of work and project plan at our May committee of the whole, I believe, so we're going to follow up on that soon. The team that's assembled for it is quite impressive. They basically wrote the scope of work and project plan components of the grant applications and have a real depth of knowledge there. So I'm really excited about the approaches that they're bringing.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. All right, there's no reports or discussion. Moving on to item 8A, which is under proposed bylaws for discussion. Subject matter, Bylaw 2039-8A1, zoning bylaw, cannabis amendment development, and from development and engineering. Recommendation is committee of the whole recommends the council give the first and second readings to the zoning bylaw amendment number 2039-A1 at the April 23rd, 2018 regular meeting. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson, discussion. Councillor Butler. And then Councillor Triple.
Yeah, just for clarification, Mr. Mayor, I'm looking at the map that's proposed here for the areas, and I'm just wondering if this is including commercial growing as well as distribution, because I see the downtown core is listed, and I wouldn't expect that to be a place for commercial growing.
Your plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's 2 overlays. One of them is for production, processing, and distribution, and that's only an industrial overlay. So basically, we might not have clarified that enough. The underlying zone is basically the only industrial parcels. 55. I think they need to be spelled out there.
Yeah, thanks, I couldn't understand it.
That would actually do it. So originally I was going to be doing 2 separate maps, and to clarify, we might just put hash marks where the commercial or the production overlay goes, and that's only in airport industrial and I-1 to I-4. That was for initial proposal. So I think that we could add that for confirmation in there as a kind of outline of those parcels, and then the retail is within the constraints, core commercial and neighborhood commercial, but with those various constraints added, as well as in the industrial areas. So an example of how that lays out, there wouldn't be anything within about a half block of the highway, and then with a 100-meter separation, potentially you could at most have, say, one at the west end of downtown, one at the east, and one somewhere in the middle with a 100-meter separation. So it sort of it spatially separates them from each other, so you don't get 3 or 4 in a row on a block. That's something that the city of Vancouver, when they developed their regulations, we had a webinar on that recently. They recommended that as a good way of kind of helping tease them apart. And then anytime there's community use zones or site-specific child-focused or youth-oriented facilities. So at the time of the building permit or development permit application, depending on what's there, or potentially the business license if it's an industrial area, staff would apply those constraints and make sure that it was fully separated from each of the areas that were intended to be avoided.
I just have a quick comment. I know it's a really good idea to get ahead of the game of what's going on with the cannabis situation in regards to our bylaws. Having said that, after listening to Sergeant Fensky this morning, and also the concern is that the feds have not really decided yet how this is going to play out, let alone the province. So are we kind of getting too far ahead of the game here?
Thank you. Excellent question, Mr. Mayor. We debated this extensively inside. There's several other municipalities who are bringing forward drafts and having communication about the portion which will be under the local government jurisdiction, municipal jurisdiction, is relatively about the location, and everything else is going to be regulated provincially in terms of retail and wholesale, and federally in terms of production and processing. So those various constraints that they have might affect ultimately what we get, and so that's the third bullet here. We ensured that this won't be brought for final readings, third and final readings, until those implementation of provincial and federal regulations are complete. So it won't get getting ahead of the game.
Okay.
But this kind of opens up a lengthy study period where we can follow what other municipalities are doing, look at legal review, and be ready when it does come down.
Yeah, great concept, thank you for that, because once the guidelines come down, then we'll be able to finalize that. Thank you. Councillor Tripp, I believe, was next, then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, I just, knowing that this was based on the public opinion survey, I just really don't feel comfortable with going forward with even a draft at this point. I feel that this is a very major issue for a community, whether or not to even have marijuana other than the medicinal marijuana available through shops or growers. And I would really like to see a much more comprehensive survey sent out to all of the residents of the community via utility bill. Possibly the same questions could be asked, but maybe even some more. I just feel that if council is going to make this decision for the community, this is a very weighty decision. We know that cannabis does impact the brains of young people under the age of 25. I know 19 is legal age, but I still feel we have a real responsibility to make sure that this is really what the residents of the community want. I'm also very concerned about what Sergeant Fensky has said about the policing situation, where if we're systematically running at 50% of the police force, and communities know that when they legalize marijuana and have marijuana sold, that policing incidences are going to go up. They're asking the government for extra money to pay for those policing costs. I just really feel that we need to be very, very careful here. I would like to refer this back to staff for further input from the community before we go ahead with this bylaw.
Is that a motion you're putting
No,
forward?
Councillor Tripp, just so you're aware, this is only a heads up, so
I
to
know,
speak, because
I
there's no
know.
recommendations or approval of the first and second reading. That's going to be done at the 23rd meeting.
We have an option to, at the committee of the whole, to refer the matter back to the staff for further information.
You have that.
I would like to do that.
So that motion's
And I'm
on the floor,
recommending,
needs to be voted on first.
I'm recommending that.
Okay. All those in favor?
It wasn't clear to me, what are we voting on?
Okay.
That we refer this bylaw back to staff so that they can do a more comprehensive survey of the community through a vehicle such as sending out something with all the utility bills, so that everybody gets a chance to weigh in on it, just not those ones who were able to get online, which was only a few hundred people.
Can I speak to the amendment?
What amendment?
Or sorry, she's, or to the referral, because it supersedes the main motion. You have a motion on the floor right now to refer this to the
Council
regular
refer to
meeting,
second reading.
and a referral motion has been put forward, so I just wanted to speak to that first before we speak to the main motion.
I would also.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, there's things in here that I like. I like the way that it's spaced out in the core commercial, but I don't think there's anything included in the survey about the large commercial grow-ups within the city limits. And that's what's really concerning me here, is that some of these industrial areas do back onto residential areas, and light pollution and smell from those grow-ups might impact those residences. So I'd just like to clarify that wasn't asked of the community already. It was just the retail aspect that was surveyed. So if I could get clarification on that.
Councillor Thompson? Discussion?
Can I?
Oh, okay. Get an answer on that one first.
Through the mayor, thank you. Answering partly for Mr. Gates here, but I was involved in the survey as well. The question wasn't asked about the location of production and processing facilities The assumption going into it is that should council wish to have those within city limits, that they'd be in an adequately buffered industrial area, so away from residences by at least 100 meters. So this was put in there for discussion. And if I could comment as well in terms of further process, this does require a public hearing to happen prior to third reading, and if should council wish to have additional input prior to the public reading, as was done for the zoning bylaw amendments in the fall, that would be a good opportunity for open houses or other measures to get responses.
Yeah. Councillor Thompson first, and Councillor Tripp.
Thank you.
Councillor Hammond.
That's right.
Thank you, Your Worship. Graham's comments have allayed my concerns in that I do believe that, and I support Councillor Tripp's wanting to have more public input, but I don't think sending out a survey questionnaire is going to be sufficient. And if there's going to be public hearings, if we could have open houses and get feedback from those impacted, not only on the production side, but on the retail side, then I would very much like to support if that's the intent.
Yes, exactly, because staff has, if I may just weigh in, the staff has mentioned earlier that they were doing a concise consultation with other municipalities, so I mean, it's quite extensive. I mean, this is not just gonna happen like that, and plus, we still have that option, and this is why I feel the referral back to staff is not a necessity at this point in time, because they are doing concise work and they plan to continue to do so. We were not just gonna have this dropped on our lap and that we have to make a decision on it. Councillor Tripp, and then Councillor Hammond, and then Councillor Butler.
Councillor Hammond was before.
Councillor Hammond is first before
Oh.
Councillor Butler, sorry, my apologies. And then gentlemen in the back.
Okay.
Yeah, that was this. Yeah, I don't want to send out another survey because we've already done one. If we are going to have public hearings, a public hearing or an open house, okay, that's fine. I just think that, if people are already buying marijuana, I don't know that just because we have a legalized store open that it means there's going to be more people buying marijuana. People that are buying marijuana now are finding it. It could be your neighbor, you don't know. So if you think that there's going to be increased use of marijuana just because it's legalized, I don't know that that's necessarily true, because if you're prone to want to smoke marijuana, you're already doing it.
Yeah.
You're just getting it from underground sources. So I'm not sure that it's going to create an escalation of problems in this community. People that want it are getting it now.
So again, Council, let's not beat this to death. Councillor Tripp and then gentlemen in the back.
So just then one other suggestion on here is I didn't see any numbers of like how many facilities may be allowed to refill it. And I guess that's something that through an open house process or through some kind of process that would be determined. Because there's nothing in there right now that says how many you could actually have.
Through the mayor, that's right, no strict limit was put on it. The spatial separation and offset from highways and playgrounds and various things would actually limit the number of retail spaces available. We haven't done the math because it partly depends on where the initial ones crop up. If you have one showing up in one part of downtown where it would be allowed, it pushes the others out to other parts. And we're looking at the map and have an assumption that 4 to 6 total in commercial areas might be allowed potentially, and then if there's an industrial one as well. We don't expect there would be more in the liquor stores though. That's the assumption.
Thank you.
Gentlemen in the back.
Les Johnson, GFTV taxpayer. Okay, first off, Mr. Watt, hash marks, cool, like that. I was going to wait till question period, but you brought it up again, so I'll do it now. Councillor Tripp, you speak of increase in crime after legalization as if it's a fact, but how can it be a fact if it hasn't happened? So I'm curious, where do you get the idea that when it becomes legalized, there'll be an increase in crime? I mean, this isn't as if we were increasing alcohol, which if you talk to the judge when he comes here, you'll find out from him, right from him, that from his point of view, booze ruins more lives and creates more problems for people in the community than pot ever does. Now, if you have more people smoking pot, people on pot don't tend to go out and do crimes. People on alcohol, on the other hand, tend to go out and destroy things. Like, I just don't know where you would get the idea that legalizing this thing is going to correspondingly create an increase in crime. And you also trot out that same shibboleth of pot is bad for young minds, when we all know that when it becomes legal, these shops will not be selling it to people under the age of 19. Like, so throwing that into the argument, to me, you're just throwing more fear and scaremongering into it to back up your idea that there'll be more crime. And I just don't understand where you get that from.
Just to comment on your statement, Mr. Johnson, briefly, you said under 19, but that's not even assuredness either until the province comes down or the feds come down.
They might even make it 21.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Could be 21, could be 19, could be 18. That's not determined yet, as was stated this morning by Sergeant Fensky and the research is still being done.
Right.
So it's all hypothetical at this point. It's still up at 30,000 feet.
And one more comment about the idea that we'll have you short-staffed and Cannabis is happening. Thank goodness
Excuse me,
it's not
Councilor
Whiskey
Tripp, let
Fest.
the gentleman finish talking, then you have a chance to rebuttal.
I'm just gonna say, thank goodness it's not Whiskey Fest. Because really, if it was Whiskey Fest, you would have lots of fighting and stuff. And probably the reason they had increased problems last year was because it's gotten bigger and you let them drink booze, but you don't let them smoke pot there. Come on, booze makes them crazy, pot calms them down, makes them mellow. I mean, really, this, and as far as industrial growing of pot operations that might be near residential areas or schools or whatever. Okay, let's see. When pot's growing, it is not dried, so it's not going to burn that easily. The fumes, well, you know, I don't know that you actually get high from the fumes that come out of a grow operation, but this is a town that has a craft whiskey shop right across from a high school. Whiskey's flammable, and I don't know if you have a still there, but stills are explosive, dangerous, and it's just kind of ludicrous to listen to the dichotomy between this will be bad, and that thing we know is bad, well, it's okay because we let it happen. Anyways, I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. First of all, in this council chambers, we respect each other. And I do not appreciate you saying to me, I don't know how you trot out this shibboleth. I am not trotting out anything. Facts from the United States prove that in both Washington and Oregon, they have higher crime statistics now because they have legalized marijuana. Now, we also have a letter that is coming from other municipalities that are asking us to approve with them to ask the province for more money based on the position that it's going to cost more for policing resources. I did not make this up. This is information and literature that we get that you may know nothing about, Les, but we do, and we have that to back up on. And as far as these other issues that you're talking about, you've obviously got an issue and a position. You would love to see marijuana growing and sold here. That's your position, but please be polite and respectful when you speak to us about what our positions are.
Mr. Johnson.
First off, we're not the United States. The United States has crime problems that we do not have because our culture is different. I'm not exactly sure of the actual increases in what kinds of crime, but I would suspect that, yeah, there was probably increases in crimes that are now violations of laws that didn't exist before because they didn't have legalized pot before. As far as things that you would worry about, that the community here really worries about violent crime, property crime, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think there's really all that much more of that, but I won't argue with you about statistics that neither of us have in front of us. So I'm sorry if you are offended by my choice of words, but that is how I see when not just you, but when I see other representatives of a point of view that has kept this illegal for years, they keep harping on the same, harping may be a bad word too. They keep demonstrating the same bias again and again and again by introducing things into the argument or the discussion that really don't obtain because they are scary. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Butler, then lady in the front row.
Just want to draw this back to the discussion at hand here on the zoning for the implementation of this. And the areas that I had concerns with were specifically the airport industrial area where we know that there's subdivisions next door, and not that the residents are going to get high by smelling the fumes of it, but a lot of people don't actually like the smell of it. They find it offensive, and there have been complaints in other areas in the province where grow-ops have sprung up, the large commercial ones that are now coming online, that some towns have gotten ahead of the game on and actually approved, and the residences near those grow-ops are complaining of the smell. So that's my concern, is for the community that's right next to the airport industrial there, and also up along where the Greyhound bus depot is. I don't know what you refer to that area as, but there's a lot of residences in there, and should the wind drift towards Valmar, I don't think it would be a stretch of the imagination to imagine what the smell in Valmar might be like if we have a couple acres of greenhouses growing pot right next to them. So, I mean, up by the dump area, I don't think that would be an issue. It seems far enough away from residences, but to only do like 30 or 100 meters from a residence, the smell's going to drift further than that. And also the larger greenhouses that have the lights on all the time could be a problem for those people living quite close to them. So for that reason, I'd like to see this maybe reworked and have those areas shrunk down in size, especially the one up by Valmar. So yeah, I won't be recommending this to go to the regular meeting at the moment.
Again, work in progress, if I understood it right from Mr. Watt. And if I had asked council earlier, let's not beat this to death here at this meeting, please. And let's move forward, because there's public hearings, there's more consultation being taken by staff, as it was mentioned by staff. So, people, let's not beat this to death.
Sorry, one more.
No, lady first in the front row.
Sure, yes, thank you, Your Worship. To whatever councillor may want to answer, it's Kate Sailors for the Gazette. I'm just curious, you know, public hearings and zoning amendments, that kind of thing, have historically low turnout. The city always has problems getting people to reply to surveys. And for instance, you know, that mandated survey that went out last year that was randomly selected, like the response rate on that was something ridiculous, like 10% of residents that got this mandated survey out in the mail responded. So I'm just curious what methods council thinks that they can implement to get the public feedback that clearly you are desiring, but we know probably isn't going to come from a public hearing or a survey.
That's a good question.
Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Kate. That's a really good question. And I think that this issue does impact the city enough that we really should get a very good representation from the entire community. So how to reach people? I mean, we do have referendums when, you know, when we have elections. Maybe this is something that we could put out as a referendum item on the election ballot.
Interesting.
Councillor Ross, then Councillor Thompson, then Councillor Butler, and then the gentleman in the back. And we are looking like we're going to beat this one to death.
Yeah, we can't force people to vote. We can't force people to vote, force people to engage in an issue that's maybe important to some of us, but isn't important to the general public. So we can advertise it as well as we can through the newspaper, through our website, Facebook, however, and we can't force people to attend a meeting to discuss something that that isn't allowed on their radar. And, you know, licensed producers already exist in and around Grand Forks. And I just came back from a week and a half in Oregon and spent some time at Oregon State University and some of the major towns in Oregon. And this discussion I had there, and because some of the people that I was working with are involved in the cannabis industry. And one of the things they said, and this was unsolicited by me, was that use of cannabis has not risen in Oregon, but what it has is it's made it more visible, and there was no increase in crime directly related to the consumption or use of cannabis.
unless people are stealing chocolate bars and potato chips. So it's, yeah, so for them, it was like finding out of the closet. Revenue was more evenly generated throughout communities, and it actually created quite a lot of new employment in and around, especially in rural Oregon.
Thank you, Councillor Ross, well said. Councillor Thompson, and then I believe I've lost track. I think the gentleman in the back, then lady in the front.
Getting people to engage, as Councillor Ross said, is not that easy. But because of the issue that is being discussed, I would fully support having an open house in addition to the required public hearings. But an open house with the maps displayed showing where it is, or where these kinds of production facilities and retail facilities could happen, gives the people a good opportunity to come and say, well, you know, that's awful close to where I live, and, you know, yada, 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 whatever their issues are. The other thing is, would these production facilities not be able to do something that would reduce the odor that was being emitted from, if any, from their operations? I don't know, but that maybe is something that we could look into. So I like the idea of an open house.
Only dependent if you have a turnout, like Councillor Ross had stated, because it becomes like election time, same times how many people do come out. So,
But if it's
to the gentleman in the back, and then,
Sorry, I have a follow-up if it's okay, Les.
go ahead, Kate.
So I'm just, the general impression I'm getting from the discussion here at council is council seems to think they're not hearing from a sector of the population that might oppose this. Like that, when we discussed the cannabis survey results, I believe there was a comment made that, oh, we're hearing from 200 people who are in favor of cannabis. So I guess my thing is, does council think that they're not hearing from people who might be opposed?
No.
And if so, if the people aren't responding through the methods that we have available, why does council think it's an issue?
We don't.
To a councillor.
The public awareness process has to work, obviously.
Well, and I think the city's been pretty effective.
Yes, exactly.
But that's the kind of impression that I personally am getting from council, is that they think they're not hearing.
Possibly maybe the media should get involved too.
Well, I mean, I put the survey story on the front page of the paper. I mean,
Right, and if anybody who was opposed had opportunity to go on and.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you're gonna hear from the people that are opposed when you put out a survey. Typically, those
Point
are
of
the
order,
ones
Mr. Mayor, I've been
that
waiting
stand
to
up.
speak for quite a while. and
You
you're not
asked a
really
question,
awarded.
so just
I'd love
answer.
to respond to Kate's question. I've been waiting with my hand up.
First, we have to have the gentleman in the back make his statement.
As far as the survey goes, you're not alone. You're following in the footsteps of actually quite a few politicians, going back to even Nixon, in that he commissioned a panel to study whether pot was bad, and they came back and said, no, it's not bad. And he said, well, I don't like that, and got another panel. And he kept doing that till he got the panel that gave him the answer that he wanted. And this is an ongoing tactic. Sure, you can conduct another survey, but if that one doesn't give you the answer you want, how many more surveys are you going to promote? I'm just curious. At what point does the city hash it out enough and spend enough money and time and effort on it for something that's actually becoming legal anyways, and a lot of the aspects of it will be out of your control. Anyways, that was my comment.
Thank you. Councillor Butler,
Thanks.
and then,
So going back a few discussions here to respond, we do need to hash this out now, because my experience on council is if you don't get something in the beginning, it gets rolled right through, and by the time you get to second reading, it's too late to revise things. We've seen that with the capital projects that Councillor Tripp and I wanted to talk about for our budget this year. There was never adequate time allowed for discussion because we were told it's too premature, you can do that later. So yeah, this is the time before it goes to the regular meeting, before things get finalized, get things right in the first place so that you don't have to amend them later. To respond to Kate's question about the best way of getting public input, I think the first thing you have to do is make sure that all the public receives the question, and the only way to do that is in the utilities bills, to make sure that everybody gets it. And then you need to make it easy for them to respond to that, so to have a box right there in the post office so they can fill it out and respond to it. Having an open house, as you said, people don't turn out. We get 15, 20 people, usually they're the same people. And with this industry, there is vested interest in this. There's a lot of money going to be invested in this new industry. So you're going to have people responding to surveys that have vested interest. So people are just out in the community and don't have money in the game, they're probably not going to be as likely to respond. And for people with those vested interests to pick up the phone and call their friends and say, hey, respond to this survey. This is the skill testing question for Grand Forks. This is how you answer. It's very easy to get people with vested interest responding to this survey. So the only way to have an adequate survey is to get it to your residents, only have one response per residence, and have it put in a box at the post office.
Okay. This is the last one, and then I'm going to call the question. We have the lady in the back.
What I'm hearing is that there's some members of council that feel there's no need to have an open house to discuss it. What I'm hearing is that when we do have public hearings on bylaws, there's very few that attend, if any. I think that the city has done, we've sent out surveys, the return response has been negligible, according to some. So, you know, we've discussed a number of ideas and initiatives here to engage with the public. And what I'm hearing is that the public just doesn't want to be engaged. That there's nothing of that vital importance to them that they're going to come forward and say yea or nay. And so I don't have an issue then with proceeding to refer this bylaw and to give it the first two readings and then proceed to public hearing and see what kind of a response we get at that. Because, you know, to spend money and time and staff resources on anything other, I'm hearing is not a good use of the resources that we have.
I concur with Councillor Thompson's comments because you know what, the city can only do so much as far as their due diligence goes, and once we follow through with that due diligence, after that, we have to move forward. Okay, I will take one more.
Gloria Cook, citizen, concerned citizen here. Look at the number of public people who are here today. Why is that, do you think? Likely, and probably because of the lack of councils or city listening to people.
What?
If many people were here, you would be listening.
My God.
Councillors.
And I think people feel that it doesn't matter what we say, you're going to do what you want to do anyway. Listen to the people.
With all due respect, I find that a little bit of a derogatory statement on your part, Ms. Cook.
Well, that is more
But the
of
fact of the matter
reality.
is, we always try our best, like I said just a few seconds ago, our due diligence. We do listen to the people, but have you ever considered the fact that this community, a lot of times, and I'm out in the community a lot myself, that they just bluntly don't care about certain issues.
No, I
It is
agree.
not about what the city does or doesn't do. There's just no interest in certain subject matters, and that's what it comes down to. So you cannot provocate or provoke people to make the decisions that you want them to make. As Mr. Johnson had said, that's not possible. Are we going to keep having surveys until we get the right answers? We have to put it out there. We've done that, and that's our due diligence. We do not just do what we want to do and we don't listen. Sorry, I don't agree with that. Councillor Hammond.
Yeah, I take offense to that statement too. And, you know, this morning, the chambers were full. It was standing room only out in the hallway. And it's because there was topics here of interest to people. When they're interested, they will come. This cannabis issue in this bylaw has been on the agenda. If people were interested, they would be here. Depending on what topics are on the agenda, sometimes we have a full house, many times we have an empty gallery. We've had public hearings and we have sat here because they have to start at 6 o'clock and we have to give them so much time. And we have sat here for an hour prior to a regular meeting and not one person has shown up. So obviously nobody's interested, but when people see the agendas out and there's a topic up there that's of interest to them, they will be here. So that's got to tell you something. It's not because we're not listening, it's because they're not interested enough to be here.
Plus, once again, this cannabis matter is still so premature. The federal government has not even made a decision. They keep backing it up. So we are now wasting council's time and the city's time and staff time discussing a subject matter that has no relevance at this point whatsoever, because the legislation can come down in so many different ways. But our staff is working diligently on this, and they are still consulting. So can we, please, this is gonna be the last one.
Last one, thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Kate, because you are exactly right on when you say that, that some councillors, and especially myself, and possibly other ones here, are concerned that we have not heard from different segments of the community who may have an opinion on this, but who haven't, for whatever reason, been able to engage. And I know that firsthand, because I talk to people, just like Mayor Conrad does, but what those people say to me is that they don't want the marijuana shops, they don't want the growers within city limits. That's what I'm hearing. And so, yeah, that's the reason why I want to do due diligence. I don't want to be a part of something where somebody can come back to me and say, well, you didn't do your due diligence. Then I can say, oh, yes, we did. We did this, we did that, we engaged you here, we tried to get your information there, and so this is how we went forward, because either we did or we didn't.
So, just some latitude to respond to that. So then, if you think you're not hearing from people, so people didn't respond to the survey, they didn't read the paper, they didn't go onto the city's Facebook page or the city's website, and I'm gonna wager a bet and say that they're not gonna come out to the public hearing. So what kind of objections can they have to it if they're ignoring 5 or 6 different avenues?
It's hard to say. I mean, I don't know who uses the computer or who doesn't. I know there are a number of seniors in this community who don't necessarily spend much time on the computer. They probably wouldn't be accessing Facebook or maybe looking at the city website. I mean, there are lots of people in town who don't even get the paper, quite honestly. I mean, you know that from subscription numbers. So I'm just saying we need to be diligent and make sure that we haven't left out a segment of the population that's going to turn around and say, well, why didn't? And I know we can go, well, where were you? But we still have to do our due diligence to find out. I believe we need to find out for sure how the majority of the community feels about this. Because it's a major issue.
RCAO has.
Your Worship, I just want to make sure that council is aware that once the legislation comes in, is that the community can't just say, no, you can't have marijuana pieces here or there or whatever, because that affects the livelihood of people once it's legislatively required and it's legalized. What we can do as a city is actually put some control measurements in where we can define where it goes. By doing this piece, it actually gives us a guideline of where it actually goes. If we don't have these pieces in the bylaw and the legislation comes in, then there'll be requests coming up all over the place, and then there is nothing put in place. So it's just that council needs to be aware that this is for the protection of the municipality as well as being able to have that control piece as to say where it goes. We can't just say no to a business that wants to come in once it's legalized.
Exactly. Because it becomes out of our control in any event, it's not in our jurisdiction. And even if we do have this bylaw, some certain regulations could possibly still come down from the province, which could override our bylaws, but at least we are showing due diligence to put these establishments in the right place. Now, with all due respect to everyone, I'm calling the question.
Okay, I just wanted to make one quick, yes. When I was a kid growing up here, I'm hearing that people are not engaging, they're not reading the paper, they're not going on the website, they're not. When I was a kid growing up here, and the council of the day had a very serious issue that they needed to make the public aware. There was Sid Cole, who had his old pickup truck with an amplifier on it, And Leo Mills sat in the front seat reading a prepared statement, and they drove up and down every street in the municipality so that the public was engaged. Should we consider resorting back to those times?
Well, if it's not broken, why fix it? All right.
You have a referral motion on the table, just so you know.
Are you still planning to engage that referral?
I would like to put that motion forward that the committee of the whole refers this matter back to staff for further information.
I would recommend against it, but I'll call the question.
No, you need a seconder.
On a committee of the whole.
No.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's defeated. Now we go to the main motion. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Councillor Butler, Councillor Tripp are opposed. The motion carries. Thank goodness for small miracles. Moving on to item 8B. Thank you very much, staff, for being so patient. Bylaw 2046, 2018 tax rates. From our Chief Financial Officer, recommendation is the Committee of the Whole selects an option for the 2018 property tax rates and instruct staff to include that option in the 2018 tax rates bylaw number 2046. Do we want to break this up into? And further to present the 2018 tax rates bylaw 2046 for the first 3 readings at the April 23rd, 2018 regular meeting. For Councillor Thompson, discussion.
I would like to.
Go ahead. And then Councillor Tripp, I believe you.
I would like to make the motion using option number 2 as identified in the options that were provided to us in this report, and that the bylaw be prepared and referred to the April 23rd regular meeting of council.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, that was a good call, because that was the one that I was going to suggest as well. So I would definitely be in favor of option 2. I just had a couple of questions to the CFO just before we proceed on with that and there's further discussion. I see in option 1 that the tax rate had gone up just a tad from what was actually presented at the Committee of the Whole, which was 4.90. This is 4.92. Is that because that taxable value figure, you'd lost about 1.7 million or whatever it was between the assessed value and the final value that came in, the final tax roll that came in?
For our Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's correct. When we did the initial calculation for the financial plan and then the workshops, it was based on the completed roll. Now we have, we do the final tax bylaw based on the revised roll, so that's why there's a difference.
Thank you. And just one more quick question for clarification. I was a little bit confused about that multiple, because it doesn't actually seem to affect the tax revenue if you just take your taxable value and divide it by the tax rate. So I just was wondering what impact, or how are the multiples factored in there?
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, the multiple actually will determine the distribution of taxes between the different classes.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
More discussion, so is council in favor of option 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Okay, moving on to our next item, which is 8C. Bylaw 2047. I apologize. Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Update Corporate Services. from Corporate Services. The recommendation is that the Committee of the Whole recommends to Council to give the first three readings of the proposed Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Bylaw number 2047 at the April 23rd, 2018 regular meeting. Councillor Thompson. Discussion. Councillor Butler.
Just to clarify, the point for putting forward this recommendation, I believe, is just to designate the corporate officer as the person to deal with the issues. Was there any other change between the two that is needed?
RCMP.
Your worship, this bylaw was put through because, or recommended to put through the council because the FOI bylaw that we currently have in place is pretty archaic, and there's new legislation that's came out. When it points to corporate officer, it's one of those things that, of course, within our organization, it's not necessarily has to be the corporate officer that is the FOI coordinator, but in most cases it is. With our organization, being that I'm the CAO, I'm the FOI head, and I can't be the head and the coordinator at the same time, and I have the ability to be able to take those powers over to the deputy corporate officer. So we have a little bit of a different place in there, but it typically does point to the corporate services.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Well, I think most bylaws should be looked at every 24 years. This just updates both the requirements and the fees that are associated with it. So I commend staff for
Actually, Mr. Mayor, the fees, the way they are haven't changed in, I don't know, 25 years or something like that. However, they were built as into the bylaw itself, while standard practice, instead of having your own fees associated, if provincial acts change, it would be easier to simply point to the act itself where the fees are located instead of modifying them every time there is a necessary change.
Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, and that leads me to my question too, because I was looking at how this bylaw really is stripped of many of the sections that were in the old bylaw, but assuming then, just a point of clarification, that all of those areas fall under the Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection Act anyway. So if you're going to refer to them, you don't need them all in here. You've got them in the FOIPA, and you're just going to follow that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. A lot of the reasons why the previous bylaw possibly existed was because at the time, this was customary to point at every little section of where there's potential of authorization going on. This is actually more or less a copy of the Kelowna bylaw, and the Vernon bylaw is the exact same after I chatted with Kelowna's FOI legislative clerk about this at one of my courses. And yeah, it simplifies, streamlines the process. If there is ever changes in the legislation, it won't have to come back every single time to council to get a reapproval. And then we obviously also, the bylaw itself wouldn't become like ultra-virus, where we're stepping outside of our authority potentially to things that have changed.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Moving on to 8E. Bylaw 2048, Records and Information Management Program Bylaw Update from Corporate Services. The recommendation is the Committee of the Whole recommends to Council to give the first three readings of the proposed Records and Information Management Program Bylaw number 2048 at the April 23rd, 2018 regular meeting. Have a mover, please. Councillor Thompson. Discussion. Councillor Tripp. Councillor Butler.
Thank you again, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, I just had a little bit of a question here on the last paragraph there in the background, which says the proposed modernized bylaw 248 to authorize the corporate officer to implement, review, amend, and maintain. Would that not be to implement from the direction of council? Because I do believe that setting policy is council's purview.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So again, this is out of discussion with how Kelowna handles their program. The program is very complex in nature. There is assorted policies, more related staff policies on how to handle records in general. So yes, we can bring everything back to council for approval to maintain and update and amend and do anything. The way Kelowna has done it is basically has put the corporate officer in charge of the program to ensure that it gets handled. As part of the community charter, the corporate officer is required to kind of do this anyways. This just, again, simplifies our bylaw. The major reason for the review is the currently the schedule for retention and disposition that's included in the bylaw. It gets adjusted continuously based on assorted acts and legislation changing along. So to bring it back to council every time it needs to get updated is really cumbersome to do, especially when staff has to keep in policy and in bylaws. Like, that's where the real reason comes in for a review of the whole process of how we've been doing things versus what the standard is in other municipalities. But
If I may just ask one more further question to that. So you are still coming under the provincial and federal, I guess, whatever legislation anyway, in terms of records retention and disposition, regardless really of what's in here. Is that right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, our mandate is to obviously follow all the acts. Community charter is only one act. There's the Evidence Act. That's the main one that actually guides a lot of how the records need to be stored. Also, when technology changes, it lets us adjust as technology advances to, hey, yes, now we got to include email, or we need to include this, and this is how many years we need to keep transitory records. This is how long we need to keep this. This is how long we need to keep that. It continuously evolves, and it gets more and more stringent.
Okay, thank you very much. That's
Councillor Butler,
good
Councillor
answers.
Hammond,
Thank
and
you.
Councillor Thompson.
My question was just answered.
Okay, Councillor Hammond.
And I just wanted to say too, that this is operational procedure and policies. It's got nothing to do with council. It's strictly operational.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Councillor Hammond has said. I have every confidence in our management team that there will be no records destroyed or disposed of or otherwise taken care of that isn't legislatively required. So I just want our management team to know that they certainly have my vote of confidence.
Plus, we come under so many jurisdictive rules and regulations. Okay, I'm calling the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. All right, moving on. We have no late items, no reports. I guess we're off to question period from the public. Gentleman in the front.
Phil Morrow, citizen of Grand Forks, taxpayer. I'm here on behalf of my neighbor Murray Rennie, who lives across the street from me on 17th Street. That's the street just behind A&W. And he's got a question. He says, have you done anything or planning to do anything with regards to his complaint? Now, he had emailed a complaint to the city with regards to the water problem in the back of his property and flooding his crawl space. Other neighbors there, their crawl space is being flooded. And I can read the latest memo. He says, this is an update on my memo dated 2018-01-25 and is shown below. Our sump pump has now been operating for about 2 weeks. The snow is now all gone, so it should not be a problem to check on the conditions that restrict the flow of water from the slough behind our property. I believe it has been declared a wetland area or a wildlife area, but at one time, a good portion of the area was used for a garden. You have my permission to forward this to any department or official who may be required to look into the matter. He sent 2 emails to the city. He hasn't had any reply, and he'd like to know what is happening. If I can give this to council, if you like. Can I present?
It goes through staff.
Go through staff.
Corporate officer?
Corporate officer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would we, manager of operations or someone like to respond to this?
Also, unfortunately, he couldn't be here because he has a medical appointment in Kelowna.
Thank you.
Your worship, the manager of operations, I would like to speak with regards to that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Reed.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We did work with highways to work on the pipes that we believed were at the bottom of the hill that was kind of holding back water. They're not drainage pipes, they're balancing pipes. So the water has to get to a certain level and then it flows over to the next section of wetland. And then we replaced the culvert that was underneath the road on Boundary to make sure that it was flowing freely. So there's a few issues with this. I guess there's no easy answer, but it's private property that the culvert was put in, and I believe the property you're speaking of was filled right through the wetlands. So I'd like to talk to planning and development and explore some of that a bit further, but it is meant to hold water in that area.
Okay, thank you. I think he would appreciate an email back explaining what's happening, if possible. Thank you very much.
Sure, I can do that, thanks.
That is actually what I spoke to Mr. Morrow this morning about briefly. That is probably under jurisdiction of highways, and it's also private property, so there is a bit of a complexity to the situation there. Am I correct?
Yes, it's a problem or an issue that was created years and years ago, so there's a few things that we'd have to look at for sure.
Councillor Thompson?
Just a question further to that. Are there any other properties in that area that might be negative, impacted by what you're talking about?
There's, I know of probably at least 6 houses that do deal with some water issues or some things that they put in to alleviate some of the issues that they've had. So there is a few homes that are affected for sure.
Mostly on the west side of 17th. Most. Mr. Morrow?
I know of one house in particular that has never had water in its crawl space until the last couple of years, 2 to 3 years. It was built with, it's a fairly new house. When it was originally built, they did all the tests and they put it above the level of the water. And now it's the last 3 years, and they had to have some pump installed, and it's constantly running also, where it wasn't about 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely a significant problem because it has been brought to my attention when I did live on the street too. The mayor can fix it, but obviously he can't. All right, any other?
Go ahead. You were here first.
No, go ahead.
Has to do with the schedule power outage.
Could you identify yourself?
Kathy, owner of Grand Forks Home Hardware, and my husband Ted. We have been in discussion with the City Works, that pretty lady in the corner, all about, you guys want to close us down for an entire day. Not only will I be losing thousands of dollars, so will the small businesses downtown. We have discussed about coming up with a better plan. Maybe doing it even half a day or on a Sunday or something where we are not closed for an entire day and lose an entire day's income. In order to do this, we were told it was going to cost either $8,000 to do from 1 o'clock in the afternoon or $14,000 more for doing it at 5 in the afternoon.
4 in the afternoon.
Well, 4 in the afternoon. But my feeling is we have to come up with a better plan. We as taxpayers need to have or be able to do our business. And I know the infrastructure needs work. Oh God, do I know that. But we have to come up with a better plan. Shutting down an entire day's worth of business is not the plan. And I'm hoping you guys will consider this because we as the downtown core are pretty upset about the whole thing. So there's got to be, we've heard all the ins and outs about contracts and who this company is and what they do, but the negotiation on the city's part of this company, it's not been good. So I'd like you guys to address this and figure out some way to help us out as a downtown core.
Just a quick comment, if I may, because I've already been approached by another business owner on this subject matter.
Yeah.
And actually an email was forwarded. And my only comment to that was, if we incur these extra costs, these are passed on to all of the taxpayers who are not business owners. So there has to be a relative level of fairness that is assessed, because we cannot show favoritism to any business. And there are always, in these situations, alternatives, which I had also mentioned, in the form of generators, etc. Because a business is an entity that makes money. So sometimes you have to spend money, with all due respect, if you're making money. So we have no choices in this with the contractor, because I don't even want to mention the other part, being in the industry, is this happens. When you have to pay overtime, it costs exuberant amounts of money. And we cannot, in all fairness, subject all the taxpayers to have to pay for particular businesses. That's...
Yes, but in all the businesses I've been into, if you plan the project right, people reschedule their employees, so there does not have to, there's shift differential, which works out to 50, 60 cents an hour, not $14,000, $8,000. That's why I don't know where this $8,000, $14,000 is coming from the contractor. Because any business works nighttime, works shift work. Every company you talk to works shift work. You know, why does the shutdown have to be during the day? You know, and I don't know why it is, because shift differential, you can book you guys as a 40-hour week it's based on. So you work with guys at 40-hour weeks on different weeks, you pay your 50 cents an hour shift differential, and that's what you do. It's got to be planned differently from the start. Not, you know, I know it's getting late now, but people, the city's got to think about the businesses a bit before they start planning all this stuff years down the road.
Most contractual businesses do not work on a shift basis. They work on a
Oh, come on,
I beg to differ, but that's okay.
Frank, I used to be in the electrical contracting trade. I know all about it. I used to ship, I
I
built the
still
old
am
every
in
day.
that trade.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you have to have your men work overtime, you don't give them shifts, you pay them double time.
It's
whatever.
not overtime.
No, it's
It's
not overtime.
shift work.
It's not overtime. You do your shift differential.
The numbers are there. We didn't make those numbers up. We got them from the contractor. What do you want the city to do?
Yes,
The city dictated
what-
to you.
Yes, what does the city, what do you want us to do as a city? But if you're hiring somebody to do a job,
For you.
you negotiate that job.
Yes.
Jesus, I know that.
We've been in business for a long time in different businesses. We know where it's coming from too. We're not new on the block either.
No,
It's like you haven't been.
go ahead.
All right, let's start off, Councillor Hammond, and
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this sounds to me like the story of the tail wagging the dog. Sounds like the contractor has us under their thumb by dictating this kind of schedule and these kind of overtime things. I've maintained right along that it's not fair to put the burden on the tax, on the business community. Every employee is a taxpayer, every business owner is a taxpayer. And when you're dealing with the amount of revenue that's going to be lost in that one day, just from that one closure, I don't think it's fair. I mean, this community runs on the economy, rotates on the basis of the businesses in this city. And I don't think that they should be penalized to upgrade this infrastructure. This infrastructure is needed for the entire city. And I think it should be shared across all taxpayers and not negatively impact our business community. Because those people are going home without paychecks for an entire day. Those businesses are losing income for an entire day. And we're talking thousands of money that's not going to be recirculating through this city. Whereas if it were spread out through our tax base, it might reflect $20 per resident or even over the period of a year, whereas it could impact a business by $10,000 just for one day, plus all of their employees. And it's not just one business, we're talking multiple businesses. So this has been a concern of mine ever since this whole project started. is that it seems to me, and I know our staff has probably done the best that they can with this contractor, but it seems like we're being dictated to by the contractors and their terms rather than the terms of the city hiring them, wanting them to work after business hours and to minimize the impact on business owners by doing it on a Sunday, or even in this case, I know our CAO has proposed something that we came through with, starting the closure later in the afternoon, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, to minimize the impact in the mornings. And even if that could help, I just don't think that the businesses should be bearing the brunt of the cost of this upgrade.
Councillor Butler, I believe, is next, or Councillor Thompson next time.
Yeah, I believe this was added as a late item to our agenda tonight. Yeah, and it'll be discussed, and I agree. I don't see Vancouver shutting down for the whole day to do upgrades. It's not a normal practice that should happen, and if it's an, well, I know we're not Vancouver, but it's just, I don't think it's an acceptable practice for any city to shut down their downtown core for a day. So I'm sure it'll be discussed tonight, and if it's an extra 14,000 in the budget, unfortunately, maybe that should have been factored in the first place, but.
Even 8,000 for 1 o'clock
I think you should shut down at 1 o'clock.
you know.
Honestly. So, yeah, we'll work this out tonight.
Well, it's giving the smaller businesses, like the restaurants and that, a chance to get their business in before it closes. I mean, yes, we're the biggest boys on the block, but there's a lot of little businesses that need that income. The bills don't stop. You guys aren't gonna give us a whole day's worth of taxes for free. You know, like, it's a big deal for a lot of these businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear and I share your concerns as well. And just a couple of questions through you, Your Worship, to our manager of operation. Can it be done on a Sunday at an additional cost of $14,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it couldn't be done. There's 5 days worth of work that the crew is coming today to start. We have electricians to change over some other businesses that were arranged weeks in advance. So we'd have to change that piece. The contractors all have collective agreements or work under a union umbrella. So we could change it to Sunday, but you would not have that cost. It would be much more substantial.
How much more substantial?
I don't know offhand, but you would have to pay them from the time they get here, because they were scheduled to do the work till, for the extra days it takes them. So they would have an outage on Sunday, you would be paying them Thursday, Friday, and then Monday and possibly a bit of Tuesday to finish up what the work they have scheduled to do. And then it would throw out your outage notifications and.
Well, you know, it's really unfortunate that that this has to happen on a weekday, and I hear the business's concerns. I mean, that is, to me, it's not acceptable that we're asking our business community to suffer in that regard. And I am thinking that there are likely substantial funds in our electrical surplus that we may have to just think about. If you can get us some solid figures for tonight, or some, you know, if that's possible, along with what's remaining and what would be taken out of our surplus, we may just have to consider a budget amendment in order to accommodate this, because I can't ask our businesses to lose a day's in operation. And if we have to suck it up and take it out of surplus, then I'm thinking that would be a good way and a good expenditure of our funds. So would that be possible to have a little more concrete information tonight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as I mentioned, the contractor is moving to Grand Forks today. It may be hard to get some numbers for tonight. I don't know if council's aware, this was not the original plan for the outage or for the schedule. The crew did come, there were safety concerns. They met with our crew, our project manager, engineer, to try to alleviate their safety concerns. This is the only section of bundle conductor that we have in Grand Forks that we have to change out. We did put some taller poles in and tried to do what we could so that they could possibly string over top to limit the outage. But in the meetings, we were unable to alleviate their safety concerns, so this was put forward as an option. We do have a timeline with Fortis that we do have to have this project done by a certain date. So canceling the contract and trying to get new contractors to come in and bid the job, there were a lot of constraints with that. So we figured one day in the beginning of April would not be peak season by any stretch. So we thought we would do some other work. We were looking at changing the water service line to Home Hardware Building that day that the outage would occur. So we would have to change some things for sure.
One thing I might add, we're not asking, I understand budgets, I understand there's a lot of money involved. And we're not asking you to move it to another day. What we're asking you is to consider moving it to later in the day. Yeah. That gives us a chance to do our due diligence as far as helping our customers. My staff doesn't get cut a whole day's worth of wages. The downtown core, at like all the small businesses, the restaurants, most of them are closed at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, so they've got a chance to get their business done. Beverly from Yale Acupuncture, she can move her clients, try and get them all accompanied, what she's got to do. We're not asking you guys for unrealistic expectations. We understand that infrastructure. I've lived here for 20 years. I know what's been going on, but we need to work together to find a better solution. And if it costs an extra $8,000 or $10,000, there's got to be a contingency fund to cover that. If you guys would have come to us in the first place, we could have negotiated a better settlement and a better time with this contractor than you guys have done. I've done contracting all my life. I know what it's all about. We've got to be able to come up with a better plan. That's all I'm asking.
So your ask is not for another day?
No, I'm asking you to negotiate something where they can start, and I know I get this, well, it's a safety to work at night. I know this. I've been in electrical trade. But, with lights and it's done every day.
That's right.
So we've got to be able to come up with a better
So you're
plan.
looking for a compromise?
Yes, a compromise.
Okay, yeah, well, that's a different approach now than what it was originally assumed that you were asking for
No,
another
because
day.
I talked to the young lady in the corner there about it.
You are CAO.
So your worship, yeah, I believe, with Sunday, that would be very problematic for the city, and as Kathleen Hobart said, that's not the expectation. I think that because the crew is already down there, I think it would prove a lot of problems and a lot of costing. However, with the report that we did, there are a couple of options that council can consider tonight that I think would appease the concerns that we have. I also wanted to say that when our staff sits down and looks at these projects, they're always looking for cost savings, and this project is very, very close to budget, and so they try to do the best that they can for what they have to work with in the costs. And so at the end of the day, they do what we can, but if there's something that happens like this over and above, is when we take it to council for consideration. And so we do have our general reserve fund that these funds can take and be pulled out of if we have council wishes to do it.
In a situation like this, Mr. Reid, is there any possibility of doing some kind of improvisation as far as a bypass to cut down on the amount of time that power is shut off to the major merchants? Is there any possibility of talking to the contractor? I know there's going to be extra costs, but I'm saying, is there any other, but there's got to be some ways of having a little bit more of an open mind to look at this.
Part of the issue was the bundle conductor itself, and they were supposed to do the work hot originally, so we would limit the outages, and that was the problem, that they couldn't continue with the work hot. So they had tried to suspend it from the poles, and as I mentioned, we put taller poles in to try to accommodate their work so they weren't too close to the conductor. But again, they had safety concerns, and we tried to sit down and discuss different options, but it was nothing that they felt safe in continuing with that work hot.
So without sounding disrespectful, are they actually looking like they're being accommodating, or are they just digging their heels in?
No, we looked at lots of different options. We had, like I say, our crew, our engineer involved. We had, it's a unique bundle conductor with the voltage conversion that we're going to eliminate and not have this problem ever again. But unfortunately, they have a lot of work to do in that time, and it's in one section. It's at the beginning of our feeder, so that was another reason why we waited until April to do this work, so that it could be backfit part of the way, so it wouldn't affect as many businesses downtown. But unfortunately, some of these are right next to this conductor, and there's no other way to feed them that was cost effective.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Well, the irony of this is not going unnoticed. We had a letter that told us that council wasn't supposed to get involved in the business issues of the city, but I'm very glad that you brought this forward, and I'm very glad that we are getting involved, because I don't believe that the businesses should suffer that kind of loss. Some of them are, they barely make, ends meet, and to even lose one day's worth of income can make a big difference. But my main concern is safety, and that's huge. And if we had any kind of a problem, or if anything happened to any of those workers, that would probably fall back on the city. I don't know about insurance and all that, but I'd like to ask David, what, if we go with the later time, and there's some of that time that's going to be done at dusk or dark, what assurances do we have, or what assessment do we have on the safety and the risk factors there?
Well, as I mentioned, they are moving to Grand Forks today. The price that was included was for lighting that they had in Vancouver, so they would have to source out some lights from either the local business or some near municipality that could offer the lighting that they need. You lose efficiencies in working in the dark, but I think safety-wise, I think it can be done.
They could still do it. And they have their own, they have insurance? And are they prepared to work? Like, has this scenario been discussed with them, that they are prepared to work at night?
We did mention that we would be looking at possibly pushing back their time and just what would be involved, and that's where we got some of the initial pricing that was put out there. But again, I don't think that pricing, because there's a union contract and they work certain hours, certain days, when you go outside of those hours, there's rest time to consider and different things that weren't included in that number, I don't believe. So.
Thank you.
And just a quick comment, Kathy, there was no disrespect intended to your business, because I realize that you are one of the major players in the downtown core, and businesses, yes, are our lifeline here in Grand Forks. Fully understandable. But
It's just that, Frank, it wasn't, I understand dealing with contractors, I do. I've done it all my life, and I understand that there's got to be a happy medium. We're not, I've lived here 20 years, I know what that infrastructure is like. I know about the power outages, I deal with it every year. And I understand it needs to be done. I just think there was a better time to do this. And, I'm not asking them not to do it, I'm not asking, to move the day, I'm asking it for a later time, so everybody has a chance to get things prepared and do their business and get all their computers shut down, their coolers looked after. 10 hours for those little restaurants and coolers and fridges, they've got to do something with that food, right? And asking everybody to go out and buy generators is just not.
Well, Not to buy them, to rent them, but you wouldn't be able to anyway.
You know,
There wouldn't be enough.
No, there's not a.
But you see, the other point is too, is the fact that, this is why I asked the question to our manager of operations. Was there any kind of cooperation, or are they just, because to make a statement, well, it can't be done, I don't believe in that either. There's always a way to do something. So this is why we often exercise all the options. And I was under the assumption you wanted the day change, because some of the other comments I received were, do it on another day, do it on a weekend, do it overnight, and that unfortunately would not be possible.
Well, no, and I understand that. It's just that when they did it the first time around, it was done on a Sunday. They weren't closed nobody was closed for 10 hours. The bank was closed. A lot of these businesses were already closed. The only ones you closed down were the grocery stores, basically, and the restaurants, but they weren't closed for 10 hours.
But I got the blowback for that too.
Oh, I bet you did.
Because that's our biggest,
I
our
bet you
Sunday
did.
mornings, our biggest day, we serve breakfast and you just.
It
So
is.
you can't please all the people
No,
all the time.
I'm not
In
asking
this case,
you to,
you
but-
probably don't please most of them.
No, but I have been in conversation with all of the downtown core that's affected, and they're all, they've left us to be their voice and to tell our story. And we understand, we keep getting, well, it's taxpayers' dollars. Yes, we are taxpayers. Our workers are taxpayers. We're all affected by this. And my bills don't stop, and neither did anybody else's, but we just need a little help.
If we can do a compromise solution with a minimal cost, that's fine, but if we were to do it overnight or another day, the numbers would be gastronomical. And
No.
that's what I said earlier, we cannot pass those kind of numbers on to the rest of the
No,
constituents.
but you
of the
guys
road.
should be able to
But
negotiate something with
if-
these guys.
If you're looking at the amounts that we discussed, be it 10 or whatever, for the size of the project,
That's
now
nothing.
being a realistic person, that's nickel and dimes,
It is,
right? So,
yes.
So
Councillor Tripp.
Can we get a suggested time or ballpark that would?
I think our manager of
discuss
operations had a
tonight?
statement to make prior to me starting to talk here on this. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to clarify that throughout this large project, we did shut down the north side of the highway from 5th Street right down to 2nd Street. So there was a lot of businesses affected. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
And that was scheduled for an 8-hour outage. We had the bank out for, I believe it was an 8-hour outage on a Friday. So the one outage was on a Sunday, but that was, again, due to reconductoring and that. There's a lot of work that had to be done, and it was all in the downtown core. We're trying to build more redundancy and a stronger, better system for the future. And inconvenient for sure. Did other people, do generators and do other things? Yes. The city didn't provide any of that, so I just want council and everybody to be aware that we're not singling out this section.
No, I've heard it
This
right from the
was-
beginning.
yeah.
I've been getting complaints.
Yeah.
Well, we also had the outage from Fortis that time where the pole went down at Roslyn and the subsidiary line or the secondary alternate line was being worked on, and so nothing could be done there either, so.
Oh, yeah, we knew about that too.
Yeah, so
But
there
that's
is,
out of our
there is,
control.
that's out of our control,
Yeah.
I realize this.
This we have some control.
But limited depending on what the ask is. And I see the ask now is a little bit more minuscule than what it originally seemed to be, so we'll discuss it.
Okay. So all we ask is a little bit of help for the rest of us.
Councilor Thompson?
So ballpark time, that
I
was
just
my
wanted
question.
to,
Tonight's meeting. Yeah.
I wanted to just say that to our management, that was my understanding that the request was for the outage on Monday. So, or pardon me, on Sunday. So, if I offended you, I apologize. That wasn't the intent at all.
RCMP.
Your worship, I believe in the request, we had a couple of options for council. They could either keep the status quo, and then we also had one for the 1 o'clock, right, and 4 o'clock. So those are the two considerations besides.
And they come with
So I'm
numbers.
down at the end at the bottom.
And there's numbers attached to them, okay, perfect.
Thank you.
I think I've seen those numbers, right?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for listening to us. I do appreciate it. And we look forward to dealing with you in the future in regards to other projects and things that affect us as a business community. You know, we are all there to make a living, and we're all there to keep our town alive, so please consider us when you're making your decisions tonight.
For sure, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And we will address it, and it will be taken care of.
Thank you, Fred. Take care. Thank you.
All right, any other discussions from the gallery, or do I get a motion?
I'm just
to-
sorry, one quick question,
Okay.
unrelated to anything else. We don't have an in-camera resolution on this agenda. We
No.
have a special meeting scheduled for that, but the special meeting doesn't list the sections under section 90 that we're going in camera for.
I believe it does.
So your worship, our special meeting is under E and K.
E and K, okay, it's just not listed on the agenda here. Does that meet our legislative requirements?
Special go in camera meeting agenda
Yeah, it's
for
listed.
2:30.
Yep,
Oh,
I have
I
it.
guess it just won't open. That's
Yeah,
all.
I
It's
have
just
it.
there.
Yeah, yeah, special to going
I think
camera.
on the resolutions tab.
Yeah, I clicked on it, it's not
Yep,
open.
down on the right hand side.
Oh, gotcha, thank you.
I have a motion to adjourn. Councilor Ross. All those in favor? Meeting is adjourned.